Chapter 1. Choose Your Destiny. Not everyone is created equal. A lesson that replayed in the mind of Izuku Midoriya, a green curly-haired young man with emerald-colored eyes and 4 freckles in both sides of his face, as he walked his usual route home from class. Memories of him as a 4-year-old laying flat out on the ground after taking a beating from defending another kid from his childhood friend Katsuki Bakugo, or Kakin as he called him, and some bullies flashed on his mind. As time passed, humans reached a point in evolution where they began to develop extraordinary powers, or quirks as they were now known. Early on, it was a handful of individuals that developed such abilities, but now, roughly 80% of the world's population has some sort of quirk, whether it be a simple one such as magnified vision or powerful ones as creating explosions from your palms. Almost everyone had a quirk. However, the other 20% are those who have not reached that level of evolution yet, which was indicated by an extra joint in their pinky toe. They had no quirk to call their own, and thus are named quirkless by society, and, in the green-haired young man's case, useless. It's been 13 years since that fateful visit to the doctor. Izuku was now 17 and on the final year of high school, and was looking at the burnt and ash-covered journal that was a result of his latest encounter with Bakugo. Baka. What kind of prospective hero tells people to kill themselves? He muttered rhetorically in a low voice with his head hung down as he entered a tunnel. The words of his class, all with pointing fingers, laughter, and looks that can be described as seriously, were imprinted in his mind as he continued his path in silence, looking at the journal still in hand. Everyone laughed as if the quirkless young adult attempting, or even getting the idea of trying out for U.A, the greatest hero university in Japan, was a joke, and that anyone else with a quirk would be taken more seriously. Even one of his classmates whose quirk allowed him to stretch out his eyeballs was taken more serious than him. Izuku couldn't help but feel utterly distraught and hurt, even though he should have been used to this by now. For the last 13 years, he had always been put down, and everyone had just about given up on him. The memories of not only the discouragement, but also the bullying and emotional manipulation from all of the students in his schools were finally reaching the tipping point. He should be strong. He should just tough it out. He should just ignore the pain of the hits and words and just move on with his day without saying and doing anything back, not as it would matter in the end. No one listened to the quirkless boy, as those skirmishes were seen as misunderstandings from the other kids. He shouldn't feel sad, and he shouldn't release his anger and sadness. But years of bottling them up were finally breaking that mental barrier, as he could feel his fingertips shake and burning as he clenched both hands into fists with his right hand digging into the journal. Gritting his teeth and with his legs shaking, he tried holding back the tears as he continued walking down the tunnel before finally coming to a standstill slightly in front of a manhole. "DKU, you're worse than all of these other extras here." Bakugo's words rang through his mind as the words of the other class members also rang in. Ha ha ha. As if a quirkless loser like you could go to U.A. He must think it's a joke if they would allow him to try out. Take these words of advice, Deku, and don't even bother trying, okay? Bakugo's words with a fake smile shone in his mind as the next sentence would finally be the breaking point for Midoriya. If you truly want to gain a quirk, then do a leap of faith off the roof and hope to get one on the next life. Izuku should have been used to this kind of abuse already, but just hearing Bakugo tell him to kill himself, and with his emotions finally getting the better of him, it made the green-haired young adult finally break as a tear made its way down his right cheek. He wanted to scream, to yell, to just release all the emotions he felt. He wanted something to just make him feel like things will be okay. But he couldn't, or at the least, he shouldn't. If he released his anger or tried to fight back, he would be ignored. If he told his mother, she might worry to death about him, or Bakugo and the others would bring him hell. Izuku couldn't hold back the tears anymore and was just crying with drops falling onto the ground below. He still wanted to cling to that dream. He didn't want to give up yet, but he didn't want to cause anyone else any more trouble. Maybe, just maybe. Maybe Kakin is right. Maybe the world would be better off without me. He thought out loud as he tried to wipe the tears away. Sounds like a plan, boy. Izuku heard a voice say as he turned around, but was suddenly being engulfed in a green, rancid-smelling goo as he began to feel the substance begin to push itself down his throat and nose. Midoriya struggled as he let go of the burned journal and began to claw at the goo. Trying to find some sort of grip, he could feel his lungs begin to burn and his mind was going frantic from the situations. Now hold still, boy. Isn't this what you wanted? I'm just helping to speed up the process, the slime villain said as he continues to push himself into Izuku's airway. The green-haired young man could feel his mind becoming hazy as his movement began to slow down. He felt his vision begin to darken, and the burning sensation he felt in the lung only continued to burn hotter until it just stopped. He felt nothing. The burning was now gone and felt as if he had a massive weight removed from him. The feeling of sludge being pushed down his throat and nose was completely gone. It was at this point that Izuku noticed that he couldn't hear, see, or feel anything. Not even the rancid smells of the sludge villain registered. All he saw was darkness. He felt nothing. Then, as if being woken up, he opened his eyes. It was at this point that he began to feel the solid ground and took note of the temperature around him. He felt a burning, yet freezing sensation that he couldn't describe as he didn't know whether he was supposed to shiver or sweat. "Where am I?" he asked as he looked around the empty black void before finding a small flicker of light in the distance. No, 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 no," Izuku said as he began to panic as he began to believe that he was dead, and that light was the way to his end. He died, killed by the one aspect of his dream that everyone told him would kill him if he tried. They were right, and he died for it. No one will mourn his death. Why should they? He was constantly pushed down, and only his mom. He isn't going to see mom again. She will not see her son come home anymore. But maybe it's for the better. He won't be a burden anymore. All that was left was to follow the light. He began to walk towards it like a moth, and as he got closer he began to notice that the light source split into two, and they took the form of flickering flames, both of which were on stands. Another detail he caught was the red banner hanging in between the two flames as the green-haired young man looked closely at it and saw that nothing was holding it in between the two light sources. He began to get closer to the banner and saw an emblem in it. It was a dark circle that had the image of a dragon in the center. "What the?" Midoriya said as on the ground in front of him a vortex of flames and a column of ice was beginning to form. It startled the green-haired young man before both the fire and ice subsided, and what was left in its place were two podiums, each with a different objects on top of it, on top of different colored pieces of cloth. To his left, he saw a yellow cloth with the image of a yellow scorpion with a silver pincer, and on top of the cloth was a small black kunai that was connected to a thin gray chain. To his right, he saw a dark blue cloth with the symbol of a triangle being bisected by a shuriken, and on top of the cloth lay a medallion that was light blue with the same symbol of the cloth embedded in it with silver outlining it. He got closer to the kunai and saw a small plaque in the column, and he began to read. "Burning Hellfire of the Shirai Ryu, Spectre Grandmaster, Hanzo Hisashi." Scorpion Izuku narrated as he then looked at the second podium, which had a similar plaque on it. "Ice-cold temperatures of the Lin K, Cryomancer Grandmaster, Kuai Liang." "Sub-Zero," he said as he looked at both of them in confusion, yet interest. "I don't understand. What does this mean? What does any of this mean? Am I dead? Where am I?" he inquired as he looked around as if waiting for someone or thing to give him an answer. "To answer your question, you and your subconscious," Izuku heard as he jumped a little at the sudden voice. "We have been observing you for quite some time, Midoriya. We apologize for this being the way we would introduce ourselves," a second voice said, which was thicker in accent. "Who's there? Who are you? And what do you mean you've been watching me for a while?" Izuku asked as he looked around for the source of the voices. "Allow us to introduce ourselves," the first voice said as once more a vortex of fire and creeping ice would begin to form in front of him in the form of a man that was slightly taller than him. The vortex subsided and the ice shattered to reveal two battle-clad men wearing different attires as both stood in front of the green-haired young man. Their attires were different, with the man from the flames wearing black baggy pants with yellow cloth wrapped around just below his knees. He had a black sleeveless shirt underneath with a yellow sleeveless GI over it, and a yellow flap in front just below his waist that was being held together by a brown rope belt. He had a white neck warmer, a yellow headband, white gash around both biceps, black fingerless gloves with brown leathery gauntlets over his forearms, and part of his knuckles which had 3 spikes on them. He carried two swords on his back, and as he looked at the man's face and saw the man looked quite old, he had a goatee and had their hair in a ponytail and looked to be Japanese. It's Scorpion's human outfit from MKX. The man who came from the ice looked to be Chinese and was wearing black baggy pants with a dark blue stripe running down the side, had gray shin guards that were similar to the ones in his forearms. He was shirtless and was wearing a sleeveless GI that had an opening in both front and back, having various symbols in each side with the same medallion on the podium in the right side of his chest. He also had a flap hanging below the waist. A detail that caught Izuku's attention was the big red scar running down the right side of his face that went down to his cheek and the blue glow that his eyes had. This is Sub-Zero's Grandmaster outfit from MKX. To say that Izuku was intimidated by the two men in front of him would be an understatement, as he took a step or two back from them before the man in yellow spoke. "Relax, Midoriya. We are not here to hurt you, and before you ask us a barrage of questions, introductions need to be made," the man said as he crossed his arms. "I am Hanzo Hasashi, former Grandmaster of the Shirai Ryu. I am Kuai Liang, former Grandmaster of the Lin Kei," the man said as Izuku tried to return the courtesy before being stopped by Kuai Liang. "We know who you are, Izuku. After all, we are your ancestors," the man said, and Izuku looked surprised. "What do you mean? So I did die and you are here to lead me to the afterlife? Fiendwick knows what an Eto expect theory Isamuchanito doant." The young adult started rambling on with Hanzo, and Liang starting to sweat drop. "Even after all these years, that habit hasn't left him," Liang said as Hanzo nodded before addressing the green-haired young man, which broke him out of his rambling. "To answer your main concern, Izuku, you are not dead." This news got a sigh of relief from Midoriya. "At least not completely," Hanzo continued, which almost made Izuku go into another panic before Liang continued the conversation. "You are mostly dead. There's a difference between mostly dead and all dead. We were able to stop you from crossing over. Thank Lord Raiden for allowing us to see you. We were planning on meeting you for some time." Izuku started flailing his arms as he began to ask questions to the two grandmasters. "Wait, you knew I would almost die? Who's Lord Raiden? What do you mean you are my ancestors? And what do you mean you've been planning to meet me for some time?" he asked as Liang approached the young man and put a hand on his shoulder. "Easy, Midoriya. Take a deep breath and give us time to answer all your questions," he said as the green-haired young man looked to be calming down. Then Hanzo continued. "Lord Raiden is a thunder god and the guardian of Earthrealm, and he informed us of your fate, which would allow us to meet you," he said as Midoriya looked on. "As to your second question, we said we are former grandmasters of our respective clans, and thus you are part of them as well. Your father Hisashi Midoriya comes from my bloodline and clan the Shirai Ryu, who carries my power, Hellfire, which allows the user to control and draw their strength from the flames of hell," Hanzo said as he lifted both palms facing upward as flames emitted from them, and next to him the ground cracked open as flames rose from the ground before subsiding. "As for your mother Inko Midoriya, she comes from my bloodline and my clan the Lin Kei, which gave us the powers of cryomancy, allowing us to manipulate the element of ice however we see fit," Kuai Liang said as like Hanzo he lifted both palms, at which point a blue/white mist and particles began to emanate before compacting it, and the form of a round ball took form, getting bigger by the second before slamming it on the ground, and some spikes of ice ejected from around the impact point. Izuku was mesmerized by the display of Quirks, as despite the simple display, he could tell the amount of control both men were showing, and something told him that there was more power behind them than what they were showing. He would be brought out of his thoughts by Liang as he continued with his explanation. "Our powers were passed down from generation to generation. However, as generations passed and Quirks started becoming more frequently normal, regulations began to close in on our clans, and to make sure that our members did not get discovered, our descendants dissolved the clans with the emblem being carried by remaining clan members. Not only that, it would seem that evolution might have dampened your inherent power, as now your parents can only do minimal forms of our powers. This is all just insane. I mean, a thunder god, realms, my bloodline, clans, and you two meeting me. It's all so much to take. It may seem so, but know that we are speaking the truth," Hanzo said as Izuku asked the question that hadn't yet been answered. "Wait, Why would you want to meet, especially now that I'm mostly dead? Izuku inquired finally. So that you may inherit our powers, Hanzo said, which made the young adult do a double take as he looked both confused and intrigued. Nanny? He asked, making sure he heard right. You did not mishear him, Midoriya. You will inherit our powers, but for the transfer to work your body would need to transform so that complications such as incineration or freezing don't happen. This is why you needed to be on the brink of death as, once finished, your body would gain our powers, but you will still look the same, almost as if you were never close to death. Liang said. Izuku was still in a state of disbelief at what he was being told. After 13 long years, he now had a chance to live his dream, that he would be able to be a hero, but before going deeper into his thoughts, he would look at the two men who were his ancestors. But why me? Why wait until now? To which he got an answer from Hanzo. Earthrealm has been peaceful for the past 3 centuries. However, Lord Raiden warned us of a danger to come to the realm once more. There needs to be a new generation of warriors to defend the realm, Izuku. We are giving you these powers because we've seen your passion for wanting to help others despite not having powers, or a quirk as you would call it. You showed that character, helping others when they can't, even at the cost of your own. So believe me, and Kuai Liang, when we tell you that we are certain of our choice and that you will be the hero the realm needs. Hanzo finished sincerely. Izuku felt his chest tighten at his ancestor's words. Those words he has always wanted to hear, words that showed faith that he could do it, that, despite all odds, he could have a chance of making it happen. And now, after years of being put down, and even his mother saying how she wished things would have turned out different for him, he now had people who believed in him. After finally release all of the emotions inside him, he picked himself up. Hanzo and Liang, thank you, Midoriya said with complete sincerity, which seemed to bring proud smiles to the two men as Liang continued. Now Midoriya, your time with us is almost up. It would appear that you are needed in your world, Liang said as Izuku looked at the man. Wait, there's still so much I need to ask, like your quirks ill inherit, and about our family, he exclaimed as Liang reassured their descendant. We'll explain more of it soon. Take care, Izuku, Liang said as he put a fist that enclosed on his palm as he bowed slightly. Until we meet again, Izuku, may you make us proud, Hanzo said as he put his fist across his chest and gave a small bow as well before Izuku suddenly felt as if he was electrocuted and felt the sensation of burning course through him. He felt so much pain that he wanted to scream, but couldn't, and before he knew it, he saw darkness once more. Not like the first darkness. He saw as now he could actually feel the cool breeze of the wind, and then the endless void was broken by a light which was getting brighter. He began to hear the world around him and heard a muffled voice that became clearer as he was coming to his senses. Hey kid, are you okay? If so, would you please wake up? Izuku heard as he also felt something hitting his left cheek lightly, but at a rapid pace. He started to open his eyes and noticed the man in front of him. He was massive in stature and muscle, wearing a white shirt and olive green pants, had golden blonde hair that had 2 bangs that went to form a V shape and a bring smile on their face. Ah, good, you are awake. I feared we lost you from the land of the living, but fear not, everything is okay now. Why? Because I am here. And it was after finally rubbing the last bit of days from his mind that he realized who he was looking at. All Might, Izuku exclaimed in disbelief at seeing the #1 hero, and after a small apology from All Might and getting his autograph, which made the green-haired young man giddy, All Might bid Izuku a safe travel as he would be taking the slime villain into custody. Before he could leave, Izuku wanted to ask him a question, but he was gone. Being the #1 hero must keep him busy. Guess all of that in my head was just a dream. Too bad I couldn't ask him, Izuku said, downcast as he looked down as his gaze fell on the burnt journal and a small smile was brought to his face. On the bright side, I got his autograph, so the day wasn't all bad, he said with a bit of a chipper tone as he began to take steps towards his home. We can see why you admire the man, Izuku. These words made him stop in his path as he heard Liang's voice. Wait, so that wasn't a dream. It did happen. Did I die again from meeting my idol? Also, how are you able to communicate with me if you are dead? Izuku went on muttering questions that were halted by Hanzo. Midoriya, breathe, Hanzo ordered, which didn't help with Izuku's confusion but did manage to stop his questions. Yes, it all happened, The transfer of powers was successful, and as to how we can communicate, we are calling from the astral plane. We are still dead, but Lord Raiden has allowed me and Liang to guide you through your training. An understanding look dawned on Midoriya. Okay, that's understandable, but what can I do with these powers? I know you showed me a small demonstration in my mind, but what exactly can I do? Do I have strength? Can I make a big and small fire and ice? Izuku went on and on as Hanzo and Liang could only watch their descendant continue his muttering before Hanzo would give a fake cough to bring him out of his rambling. While we like your enthusiasm, Izuku, we will explain everything once we start your training tomorrow. Yada, Izuku said with a jump as Liang added. Yes, however, we will need to find a controlled environment for you to train in the meantime so you don't accidentally hurt yourself or others in the process. Any places that we may use? Midoriya asked. We can use that beach that accumulated garbage to train, Hanzo said. You mean Dagoba Beach? Not that I mind, but why there exactly? No one goes there, and wouldn't a forest or something like that be better? The green-haired young man asked. Normally it would. However, you still need to learn control, and we don't want you to accidentally cause a forest fire or freeze one. No one goes there so you can practice with free range, and the garbage can work as training, Hanzo explained. Izuku nodded in acknowledgement. Okay, that makes sense. So we begin tomorrow, correct? Yes. So head home and rest up. You'll be trained the best possible way you can, understand? Liang asked as Izuku gave another nod which brought a smile to the two ancestors. From that point on, Izuku Midoriya would not only begin his training in how to use his quirk, but would also begin the steps towards a new path in his life. Oh, almost forgot. This is the story of how Izuku would come to be the realm's greatest combatant. Chapter 2. Training Mode. It is the early hours of the morning with the dark in the sky being broken up with the golden tint from the sunrise as it covered everything it touched with a golden color. Down on land, we see the waves of the sea calmly crashing into a garbage pile that is covering what is supposed to be a beach. We hear the grunts and puffs as a fridge is making small movements in place as we see a green-haired young man wearing black shorts, a white t-shirt, and red shoes with ropes around his torso as he is struggling to make the fridge budge. Izuku Midoriya's first day of training was starting, and while he knew it wouldn't be a walk in the park, his first training exercise was giving him some struggles, not being helped by the constant hyping from his masters. Keep pushing onward, said Hanzo. It shouldn't be too hard, Kuai Liang said as Midoriya was having trouble keeping his footing before falling face first onto the sand and getting the grainy material all over him. Okay, take 5 minutes, Hanzo said to Midoriya as he heard a groan from his student as Liang would talk to Midoriya. You still have a long way, Midoriya, Liang said, to which he got a muffled response from the green-haired young man. On my training, I'm going to guess? Midoriya asked as Liang would give a shake to his head before answering. On becoming a hero, Liang responded as Midoriya let out a sigh as he would push himself off the ground and begin to shake the sand off. He would begin to loosen the ropes around his torso as Hanzo would reply to Liang. You certainly haven't lessened on your teaching methods, Liang. We may be dead and he may be our descendant, but that should not be an excuse for not having discipline. Considering our circumstances and the time we have for Midoriya's exam, he will need all the training possible. To which he got a nod from Hanzo as Midoriya would respond to his two masters. So I'm going to guess that the training I'm doing isn't traditionally what you did for clan members. What did you do exactly? Did you throw them off mountains to see if they survive? Midoriya asked as he remembers a fighting game where a father threw his son, then grandson, off a mountain in a helicopter, to which Hanzo would respond to his student's question. Don't be ridiculous, Izuku. Why would we throw clan members of a mountain? However, you are correct. It isn't the same way on how we trained clan members, as usually we would be there to spar and have some weapons to fight along with sending members off to the wilderness to survive for a few days before training once more. Hanzo finished, which made Midoriya somewhat disappointed yet relieved that he wasn't doing the same training method, but decided to keep quiet on that front. And Midoriya just became we can't read minds does not mean we don't know what you may be thinking, so don't think that just because we aren't doing the traditional training method that we aren't going easy on you, Liang said, which made the green-haired young man went on a stuttering spree. My apologies, Grandmaster. Not that I don't want to do the traditional training, and imsasa thought. Midoriya started going as Hanzo, and Leon could only watch at the amount of work they would have to do to make Midoriya into a warrior. "Sai, this won't be an easy process, Hanzo," Leon said. "Have patience, Leon. It may not be your style, but remember to hold that in mind. Besides, Izuku is willing to admit defeat and learn," Hanzo said, which brought a sigh from Leon. "That may be true. He is more willing to listen when compared to her, but it does not mean it won't take time," Leon said as Midoriya seemed to have not noticed his grandmaster not listening anymore. "In due time, Leon, in due time. Izuku," Hanzo said, which managed to get Midoriya to stop as the voice of the Shirai Ryu master rang loudly in his head, which caused him to jump in place. "Yaiza Master H. Hanzo," Midoriya said. "Your break is over. Proceed with moving the fridge like planned," Hanzo said as Midoriya gave a simple nod before moving the ropes back around him and pulling slightly as it began to budge somewhat. "Okay, Grandmasters," said as he began to pull on the ropes before wanting to clean up any confusion he might have had. "Are too sure gasp this is the best way to train me. Not that I'm gasp complaining, but is there no other way?" Midoriya asked as he began to gradually pull on the fridge, to which Hanzo would reply. "As of now, it's the best available place for you to train. Cleaning this garbage may be able to help with training your body as you carry and move it. Not only that, but you will be helping this community in clearing this beach," Hanzo said, which Midoriya could understand the logic behind, as he did feel many areas in his body feel sore from not much activity. Besides, it's not like finding the other clan members to help with the training would do much help as. Hanzo stopped as they would hear the sound of something slipping and falling on the yellowy sand, at which point they saw Midoriya having face-planted once more into the ground before scrambling himself to his feet. "Wait, there are more clans members. How do you know? And if they could train me, why don't we go to them?" Midoriya asked with genuine questioning, as his masters never mentioned anyone else being part of the clan aside from his family up to now, to which Leon would answer. "Yes, Midoriya, there's other members to our clan. Remember what I told you about the clans dissolving after the rise of Quirks?" To which Midoriya gave a nod as he remembered the previous day's conversation. "Good. Then you should know that aside from the emblems being held by those who are descendants of the clans, a vast majority of those who remain don't know the true meaning behind those symbols. Like your family, Midoriya, what did they tell you about the emblems of our clans?" Leon asked as Midoriya would respond. "Mom and Dad only said that it was from their families, and that's about it," Midoriya responded, to which Leon would comment on. "This is what enforces my point, Midoriya. Hence why Lord Raiden gave me and Hanzo the ability to sense the energy of descendants from not only our clan, but from our comrades as well, which was to ensure we could help on defending the realm," Leon said, which Midoriya could only look more wide-eyed at the thought of more clan members. "That still doesn't answer why don't we go to them for training?" Midoriya asked as Leon would reply. "While we can in a way sense them, it is only after gaining some sort of evidential confirmation like a power that we can pinpoint them. Otherwise, we only get alerted that one is within the area we are in. At least that's how Lord Raiden described the ability," Leon said, which Midoriya brought up a point to ask. "So how far does this sense go, and what do you mean by your comrades as well?" To which Hanzo would answer. "It would be approximately a few meters. This means that we can sense other clan members and warriors out there, however what the number is we cannot tell," Hanzo said, which made him rethink his question on why they couldn't just go and get trained by clan members. "As to the second question, it is a story for another time, Midoriya. For now, we will continue with your training," Leon finished as Midoriya could only pull on the ropes with the many questions he will have to ask once more later on when training finally slowed down. A few hours later, after spending a good portion of the morning moving appliances, trash bags, and other waste from the shore, the second part of his training would begin. "All right, Izuku. Now that you are warmed up, we will begin in teaching you the basics of combat. From what I and Leon have observed, you don't have any training either in combat or defense," to which Midoriya gave a slow nod. "We'll begin with teaching you how to throw a punch and kick along with how to dodge," Hanzo as Midoriya would respond. "Right, Master Hanzo. At Grandmasters, what do I practice on exactly?" Midoriya asked as Hanzo and Liang figures that their descendant would ask them that first, so Liang would be the first to respond. That fridge that you moved earlier. Use that to practice on. It is large enough to give you places to hit and heavy enough so that you don't topple it over by accident for now. Liang said as Midoriya looks to where he placed the fridge along with another pile of garbage as he simply gave a nod and a response as he moved his way towards it. Right. 5 minutes later. As the next step in the green-haired young man training began, the two grandmasters ran into a roadblock. Midoriya, you need to keep form when throwing a punch and keep your knees bent. Liang said as Midoriya tried to follow his master's orders, but kept missing the beat to the training as with each failed punch thrown would result in the green-haired young man getting more sloppy and injuring his knuckles more as they were turning red-pinkish with various scratches and scrapes on them. Okay, Midoriya, that's enough. Liang said as Midoriya would come to a halt as he would be releasing some small pants and be breathing somewhat more than before. You need to focus, Midoriya. You seem to be adapting and following orders, but your strikes are rigid, lacking strength behind them. Liang said sternly, as while he knows that he and Hanzo need to ease Midoriya into the training, discipline was still needed to ensure proper work ethic. At the comment, Midoriya would rub his knuckles from the soreness as he responded. I am Pant following your instructions, Grandmaster. Pant, I am sure if I hit it harder. Midoriya would stop as Hanzo interrupted. Perhaps I may know what's the problem. To which Midoriya would focus his attention on listening to what his ancestor may have to say. You are hesitating, unsure of what you are doing is the right move, and whether the amount of strength you are putting into the attack is the right amount, or if you are moving the right way. It's making you rigid, Izuku. Am I correct? The Shirai Ryu Grandmaster asked as his descendant gave his answer. Yes, Midoriya answered quietly as Hanzo would continue to add on. While considering what has happened to you in your life, it is reasonable to see that it would affect your confidence in not only interacting with others and your attitude, but also your decision-making. Hanzo said as Midoriya could only look to the side as the years of bullying and discouragement from many people would be glimpsed in his mind. Now don't be discouraged, Izuku. Use that as your strength. If we want you to be more focused on your attack and to do so without hesitating in the heat of the moment, we will have to work on your confidence, which can begin with your stuttering. Hanzo said as Midoriya would quickly respond. Yais SSI. Midoriya stopped for a second as he had to remember the words spoken to him from his master just a few seconds ago. His master's words rang true as while he did want to be a hero and fighting would be a part of the hero work, he cannot hesitate in critical moments when it matters as it could not only kill him, but could also put at risk other civilians. Seeing this as the moment needed to step forward to improve, he readjusts himself and with a determined look in his face, he confidently replied to his masters. Yes, Master Hanzo, which manages to bring a prideful smile from Liang and Hanzo to see the quick steps taken by their descendant to improve themselves. Now having his confidence up, Liang would use this opportunity to continue training. Now Midoriya, once more and don't hesitate, pull from within yourself and strike. Liang said as Midoriya got into a stance with his legs apart and knees bent. His right arm pulls back into a fist and his left arm facing forward to block or counterattack. Scorpion's fighting stance in 11 Malawian quatches. Now with determination in his sight and with the fridge being his target. He threw his right fist forward while turning part of his torso in that direction, which managed to make a considerable impact on the fridge, as while it didn't make a hole on it, the fridge did have a small dent where Midoriya's fist stroke along with the fridge having wobbled slightly. Attack, Liang said as Midoriya repeated the motion with his left fist, as he would repeat the motion as he left another small dent into the fridge, making it wobble again. Attack, Liang would yell again as Midoriya once more repeated the motion and each strike getting more stronger and Midoriya showing more comfort in his strikes as opposed to the rigid and timid shots he did earlier. 5 minutes would pass as the repetition of motions were made as the fridge would now have an accumulation of dents throughout it as Midoriya kept going. That's enough, Izuku, Hanzo said as Midoriya came to a halt as he looked at the now worn fridge door. He was now breathing more heavily from the repeated motions, but was more glad at the progress he was making somewhat. How do you feel? Hanzo asked as Midoriya gave his response. Great. Asterisk pant asterisk. I think I can keep going, Midoriya replies before Hanzo continued. I meant your knuckles. How are you feeling them? Hanzo asked, which made the green-haired young man raise an eyebrow before responding. Just fine. Like I said, I feel like I can keep going. I don't feel any pain, actually. Midoriya started to realize as he looked down at his knuckles to see that the red, sore skin and scrapes from before were now gone, and pain that he felt when punching the fridge was now gone, as if he never punched it, to which he began to question it before Hanzo would answer, figuring what his descendant's question would be. It would appear that our powers have taken effect as expected, Hanzo said as Midoriya would look confused as he asked his questions from confusion. Wait, I thought Hellfire and Cryomancer were the main powers, so why can't I feel much pain, and why have my scrapes and such look like they are gone? Midoriya asked as Liang figured to be the one to answer the questions. Yes, we did state that out powers primary usage. However, as I told you, we would explain more as we progressed, Midoriya. Aside from using Cryomancy and Hellfire, it allowed us to have a high tolerance towards pain, along with it allowing our bodies to keep fighting despite injuries we may obtain from our fights. We will continue until our bodies can't fight anymore, Liang said as Midoriya asked. Like how in fighting games the characters still fight and are back to complete health at the start of rounds. To which Liang would respond. In its simplest form, you can say as such, this high tolerance in pain does not mean that you won't feel anything. It means that you will suffer injuries at a slower rate, and while your body will pull itself together from major injuries like cuts, broken bones, and small impalements. Take too many injuries, or one that is too much for your body to handle, then you will be dead on the spot. Your power will make you fight longer, but it does not make you immortal. Remember this, Midoriya. Liang said with warning in his tone as he gave this information to Midoriya, as it was both good to know that he'll at least be able to take a hit, but scary to know that even a small impalement could just be shaken off, and he didn't even want to know how a body could pull itself back from broken bones to keep on fighting. At this, Hanzo would pull his descendant from his train of thought. Like we told you yesterday, Izuku, the transfer of power was made which allowed your body to be more resilient, but to use the power of fire and ice will be training that will take some time to master. Understood? Yes, Master Hanzo. Good. Then we will continue with the next form of training after cleaning up more of the trash, Hanzo said as Midoriya turned his head back to the deluge of garbage that looked like he barely made a dent to it, as he let out a sign as he made his way to grab a tire from the shoreline. As he did this, Liang and Hanzo would converse with each other without Midoriya listening in on them. Midoriya has heart. You sense it too, Hanzo? Asked Liang to his Shirai Ryu friend. That he carries in spades, along with a wanna learn. If he can keep this spirit up, then he might be able to master both powers, Hanzo said as both he and Liang would observe as Midoriya would lift a wheel over his shoulder and begin jogging his way towards where he was to put away the cleanup. You may be right on that, Hanzo. However, if we want him to be ready by the time of his exam, we need to be strong on his training and teach him everything along with how each of his powers work, Liang said as he needed to correct himself. While he has mastered and passed down this power to Midoriya, it was his descendant's job to make it his own and not what he was, which Hanzo took notice and gave a nod of approval as they would continue to see Midoriya run back and forth on the pile of garbage. A few hours later. Now that another section of trash was moved, the next phase of training began, and that was quirk training. All right, Midoriya, while you now understand how your power affects you, you will have to learn on how to draw on this power for defense and offense, Liang said. Right, Grandmaster. Any advice you can give me on how to use your power? Midoriya asked as Liang replied. Yes, you need to keep a concentration on what you are wanting to form when using cryomancy. You saw me making the ice ball when we first met. You need to concentrate on what you want to do and help give it form, Liang said, which was somewhat wage of an explanation, but enough for Midoriya to have an idea on what to do. As the green-haired young man prepared to concentrate, he got a reply from the Lin K Grandmaster. And Midoriya, it's not my power anymore. It's yours, remember this, Liang said as Midoriya took his words and gave a nod with determination as he would close his eyes and take some breaths to relax. He would put both palms in front of him with both palms facing each other and try to focus on that. He would continue this process for a few minutes, and would continue to follow this process as he began to feel some energy begin to flow from his arms as a small swirl of icy wind would pass by him and circle his open palms. Then another swirl of wind would take place. Then another, and another before slowly a small white-bluish ball the size of a tennis ball would take form in the center of Midoriya's palm. After many minutes of concentration, Midoriya would open his eyes to see the small creation he made as he could only look at the small ice ball he made. Sure, it was not as big or as chilling as his grandmaster's, but he felt genuine awe at seeing the first examples of his powers. He would continue to look at it before losing concentration, and the small ball of ice dissolved while made Midoriya slightly disappointed but would get a response from his masters. Don't see this as a failure, Izuku. You managed to get a grasp of how to summon it, Midoriya. Learn from this and continue to improve. Midoriya heard, and if he could see his masters right, how he could swear that they held a prideful smile on their faces. Now, Midoriya, now that you know how to summon cryomancy, it can give you some insight into how Hellfire works. It's similar to Liang's power, Hanzo said as Midoriya would reply back. Yes, Master Hanzo, he said as he would go back to concentrating. However, unlike before, no ball of fire was being made, but rather he would make another ice ball, which, while slightly bigger than before, wasn't what he wanted and thus lost concentration. The process would repeat itself several times before Hanzo stepped in once more to guide his student. It would appear you need more insight into the technique, Midoriya, Hanzo said as Midoriya would loosen up to listen in. Yeah, I do the same thing that I did with cryomancy, but I am not getting Hellfire, Master Hanzo, Midoriya said as Hanzo replied. While Hellfire works similar to cryomancy, it also depends on another source to help power your attacks, Hanzo said as Midoriya would look with intrigue. What would that be? He asked as Hanzo gave a simple response. Loss and pain, to which Midoriya looked confused as the Shirai Ryu Grandmaster would continue to elaborate. Hellfire draws on the painful experience you had within you. The greater the trauma, the stronger the attack, similar to cryomancy. However, unlike it, there is one drawback to this power. While in cryomancy, if you lose too much concentration, you won't be able to summon ice. With Hellfire, if you dwell too much on those experiences, your attacks will grow stronger. However what? Midoriya asked with concern in his voice. You'll lose yourself and be consumed by Hellfire. Your reason will cease to exist until what target you have in your mind is destroyed, Hanzo said sorrowfully as Midoriya could only look at his palms as he could only think of what ramifications it could happen if he's not careful. I and Hanzo will safegate your power so that you don't get consumed by it until you learn to control its power. For now, try concentration once more, but focus on one experience, Liang said as Midoriya gave a nod before taking a deep breath and releasing it as he once again took the position of concentration from before. This time he focused on his fury and loss, which was a tad difficult since it wasn't in his nature to show his anger towards anyone, but if he needed to get stronger, then he will find the way. He decided to focus on the bullying from when he was a child, from the name-calling of Deku to the beating he got from protecting that kid to all the grown-ups ignoring the quirkless kid. Midoriya could only feel the pain of loss as the memories continue, at which point small embers would begin to appear from his palms as he began to feel a surge of energy begin to emanate. The embers would begin to sprout and swirl around the open space in his palms as it concentrated into a small golf-sized ball of fire. Had it been left at that, the two ancestors would call it an achievement. However, they quickly took notice as the size of the flames began to grow in size and intensity. Midoriya continued to dive deeper into his thoughts as more and more painful memories would begin to overwhelm him as the flames continued to increase until… Midoriya, that's enough. The green-haired young man would lose his concentration as he would open his eyes and only manage to catch a glimpse of the fireball he created, which was the size of a tennis ball. The flames dissolved as Midoriya could only look in confusion at what happened. What happened, Grandmasters? Midoriya asked confusingly as Hanzo would give his answer. You were losing control for a moment. Thankfully, it was only a little bit, but we cannot allow it to repeat itself, Hanzo said as Midoriya could only look in shock at his hand, as while he felt an increase in power, he was being overwhelmed by his thoughts and memories. It will be some getting used to in limiting those thoughts. You may need to train on control, however, now that you see what may happen if you become overwhelmed, you can have a sense of what your limit is for now. Liang said, which gave Midoriya some ease in knowing his limit for now, but he will need to find a way to control his thoughts and emotions more effectively if he wants to have safe usage of Hellfire. As he got lost in his thoughts, he would hear a sigh from his grandmasters as Hanzo would be the first to respond. Listen, Izuku, it's the first time learning to use Hellfire, and we will attempt it once more, but do put a restraint on how much of your inner turmoil you let out. Do remember to not let it happen again, understood? Hanzo asked, which Midoriya would nod with assurance, which Liang would respond. Good, now try again. To which Midoriya would go back into a concentrating position as he would once more dwell in his thoughts. The feeling of helplessness, the feeling of his heart swelling from the words and discouragement was beginning to take effect as he felt a surge of power flow from him. That's the feeling I need to acquire, Midoriya thought as he would focus on the power and begin to concentrate in its flow of direction and putting it on his palm as the sparks of embers would begin to show along with flames emanating from them. Soon the flames would be condensed into the form of a tennis ball, which seemed to be in more control than before. Congratulations, Izuku. You seem to have grasped the use of Hellfire, Hanzo said as Midoriya opened his eyes and would look down at his palms to look at the ball of flames as he became mesmerized by the dancing flames as he began to cut the flow of energy into the flame ball as it faded away. He felt a sense of pride knowing that he was able to at least get some control over his quirk now from both cryomancy and Hellfire, though it was still a long way for him before it is ready, to which Liang would respond. There's still room to improve, Midoriya. However, I congratulate you for making this much progress in the first day, Liang said, as while Hanzo was right in his teaching methods of being hard on his students, he still showed signs of pride in their advancements, which while Midoriya couldn't see his grandmasters physically, he felt as if they were smiling on him right now. Thank you, grandmasters, Midoriya said as Hanzo would continue. This is all on you, Izuku. That should be enough for quirk training. We will continue refining their usage along with helping with the mental fortitude to help with your concentration. For now, continue with the cleanup, and then we will work once more on combat training, and then you can rest for the day, understood? Midoriya would respond with a nod as he would go ahead and begin the cleaning process once more. This would be Midoriya's routine for the next 10 months before the entrance exam for UA: waking up, cleaning, combat training, cleaning, meditation, quirk training, cleaning, and the combat training once more along with cardio. By the end of his first day, the green-haired young man was ecstatic to show his mother his new quirks, which while Liang and Hanzo were hesitant at first due to Midoriya's lack of control, the green-haired young man convinced them in allowing his mother, father, and the quirk registry to know of his quirk development. His mother would not only be gleeful but would break into tears once Midoriya showed her both cryomancy and Hellfire. So much so she called his father, who he could hear on the other end, had a very happy tone in hearing their son's new development. After this point, Midoriya would begin to ask about his lineage and his clans to his mother and father, to see if they knew anything more about their clans and if anyone else in their family tree had any similar quirks to his. His mother brought up about her great-uncle from her father's side that could lower the temperature and make it into snow or ice. However, he could only make some the size of snowballs, and on his father's side, his great-grandmother could increase or decrease the temperature of anything. She wants to be thought it was mostly kept to about room temperature. Not only that, but he would learn more of his clan, such as how both his parents learned about their clans, with his mother learning from her parents and his father when going through old photos. What Hanzo and Liang told him about the original purpose of the clans being assassins and warriors was unknown to them, both of which Midoriya decided it would be best. His masters have revealed more information about the Shirai Ryu and the Lenkei, such as their alliances, members, battles, traditions, and the founding of both clans, which brought interest when Midoriya was told that Kwai Liang's and Hanzo's is the second foundation of each clan, which in Midoriya's attempt to get more details, his masters would sound uneasy and jump the topic altogether. It was a question he would keep for later. While he could tell some people of his quirk's development, such as his family and the quirk registry, both grandmasters suggested to keep it a minimum to ensure that he wouldn't have to forcefully use his quirks because of the bullying, which Midoriya was hesitant, but figured that it would be for the better for now. Meditation has helped make sure he could maintain a better control on not only his quirks, but also on the daily treatments he would receive, which at that point it seemed to just piss off his aggressors the more he ignored them, which did manage to get Bakugo's attention as he would once again threaten him and blast an explosion near his face before leaving with a warning. It was not the most glamorous of lives, but he had to keep training to ensure he made it into U.A and to make sure he doesn't hurt anyone from his quirk usage. As months progressed, the green-haired young man would begin to grasp both quirks at a more consistent level. Both Hanzo and Liang took notice as Midoriya became more mentally resistant to his pain and losses. He was able to gain better control of Hellfire, and in no time created a flame ball the size of a basketball, and with a more focused mind, he also managed to do the same for Ice Ball. He would nearly burn and freeze part of the garbage and beach in his target practice, which he would receive a scolding from both Hanzo and Liang. He would come to better hone them as he would be able to throw them at their target without many failures. He would begin to gain more access to different skills as his strength continued to grow. Soon he would learn to implement fire and ice elements into his strikes along with being able to amplify his attacks, allowing him to tap into his power for a brief moment to deliver a stronger version of not only his strikes, but also his abilities. Individually, both Hellfire and Cryomancy would develop more. For Hellfire, he would learn a dashing ability that allowed him to dash forward at a good speed and make him able to phase through a solid object, which he dubbed Demon Dash. Another ability he learned, and he would take a page from his father and learned how to breathe fire from his mouth, which when he told his father about it, pride would be ever present in his tone through the phone, which he dubbed Demon Breath. As to why adding the word demon, is because an interesting detail happened in that when he used the ability, his body would turn into a translucent orange color that ended up showing his skeleton. Though both did strain him differently. For Demon Dash, he would feel his muscles burn at the engulfment of flames, and Demon Breath would make his throat sore after a few moments of usage. For Cryomancy, developing more abilities for it had been easier than Hellfire due to it not needing him to focus on his pain and loss of emotions, which has allowed him to both Ice Slide and Shoulder Bash. Both did similar actions with allowing him to slide on an ice sheet at a quick pace, but both have different results. Ice Slide would usually push forward, and if he chose to amplify, then he could move fast enough to make an ice wall behind him and slam someone or thing against it and break through it, which Shoulder Bash made him a shield of ice to cover him as he slid forward with brute strength. Another ability he would learn would be Ice Burst, whereby pure accident when trying to see if he could wield both fire and ice in both hands, he would only summon ice in both palms. After trying for some minutes, he would clasp both hands together out of sheer boredom before a small blast of ice blew in his face, which surprised him but also made the gears in his head turn, and after several tries would name it Ice Burst. The months of training and experience would be repetition past repetition for Midoriya. However, an incident during the early months of his training would help him become more determined in his goal of being a hero, but also unknowingly meet someone. 3 months in training. Midoriya was wearing black shorts, a white t-shirt that said t-shirt in the front, and his red shoes as he was having a small discussion with his masters as he was finishing up the last of his routine training. He has been learning more abilities to his quirks, but he would want to look more into Hellfire to develop it even further than what currently it is. Master Hanzo, is there any way that I may be able to better control and access Hellfire? Midoriya said as he continues jogging down the concrete path of the park as the sounds of crickets and the occasional flickering of a light post were what gave the scenery a solitude look. As of now, meditation is the best form of controlling Hellfire izuku. Don't rush their kind of things, we will work as it happens. Hanzo said as Liang would add to the discussion as Midoriya passed 2 civilians who sounded like they were arguing. Hanzo is right. Midoriya, while wanting to learn more on how to control your quirks, is admirable. You can't force it out and expect to master it. Remember to keep a strong mind and a focused vision, understood? Liang asked as he got his reply back. Yes, Grandmaster, Midoriya said as he continued to walk down the path, and would have been through the clearing in the park had he not noticed the increase in voices he began hearing behind him. He would see, though not the forms of the girl and guy he passed moments ago. They were a fair distance from each other as he jogged, and he would have thought nothing of it, and probably would have been just another couple dispute had he not heard the sound of slap being heard, at which point he would whip his head around, and see as the shorter of the two silhouettes was trying to push the bigger of the two away before being pulled by the arm. "Help!" A higher pitch, feminine voice said as it seemed to come from the smaller of the two silhouettes, which must have been the girl as he saw her get slapped by the guy as he saw her fall to the ground. At that moment, Midoriya could only feel heat and fury inside him as the moment he tried to run and use Demon Dash to get to her. He then saw embers and smoke appear around him, as next thing he knew he was now in front of the guy who was roughly his height. Midoriya would briefly be confused at this discovery, but before he dwells too much on it, he needed to focus on the real threat right now, and without hesitating, he threw a punch square on the left side of his face. The guy would tumble over and fall onto the ground as he would clench the side of his face as he began to get up. Using that small pause, without turning, he would yell to the girl who he hasn't seen how she looks yet, as she was in the shadows though he was under the light post. "Run!" Midoriya yelled as he would hear the girl move behind him as her steps were beginning to fade away into the background as the guy in front of his was beginning to pick himself up, looking at Midoriya with pure anger and confusion. "What the hell, man? Where did that bitch go?" he yelled as Midoriya would remain quiet and only look with anger in his face as the guy would yell once more. "Oh, tough guy, huh? Well, let's see if you remain tough after I am done with you," the guy said as Midoriya took a look at the guy. He had a thug-like appearance with sleeveless shirt and jacket which showed the tattoo of S Black Dragon on his right arm and short brown hair. Midoriya got into a more defensive stance with his legs apart and with both palms across his chest facing one another, Sub-Zero's fighting stance in 11 Malawian kwachas, preparing for what the guy may do as he lifted both palms, but before Midoriya could react, he was blinded by a light that came from his palms. So that must be his quirk, Midoriya thought as he shut his eyes, and next thing he knew, he felt a sudden pain in his abdomen before feeling a fist hitting Midoriya's face as it made the green-haired teen tumble onto the ground. Thank goodness for his quirks, giving him high tolerance to pain, because while he did feel the impact of the attacks, it was only for a few brief moments before it faded. After the surprise attack, the guy would begin to taunt the green-haired young man. "Not so tough now, hero," the guy said as Midoriya would grit his teeth and heard the voice of his masters. "Midoriya, don't fall for his taunts," Liang told him as Hanzo would add to the comment. "Don't drop your guard. Attack him when his guard's down," Hanzo said as Midoriya began to feel the blood stop from his nose as with a shaky hand grabbed his nose and with a crunch repositioned it back into place. The pain hit him briefly, but he began to feel it being put back in place, which seemed to get a shocked face from the guy before a smirk appeared in his face. "Well, would you look at that? Taking it like a champ. Now," the guy said as he pulled out a knife from his pocket and twirled it in hand and ran towards Midoriya. "Goodbye," the guy said as Midoriya would feel a cold chill course through him before jumping back as the guy would prepare to strike. In that brief moment in time, Midoriya felt the chill in his body intensity before suddenly bursting outwards, and as he looks in front of him, he saw ice had formed where he once knelt, though the odd thing was that it looked almost like a replica of himself, but out of ice. He didn't have much chance to look at the ice sculpture though as the guy would hit the ice and Midoriya saw as his right arm began, then his whole body quickly become encased in ice as he stopped in mid-motion of his thrust attack. Midoriya would pick himself up from the ground as he saw that the wounds managed to close themselves up along with his nose. Midoriya would begin to walk towards the guy and prepare to launch a strike at him before Liang vaulted him. "Midoriya, don't attack. He has been immobilized. He can't harm. He may be frozen, but he won't die from lack of air, so he will be fine," Liang said as Midoriya would lower his attack as despite having some anger at the random guy, his masters were right. He was no threat right now. Remembering why he was there, to begin with, he would look around to see if the girl was anywhere near where they were, and after a few calls without responses, he figured she must have escaped. Releasing a sigh of relief, he would pull out his cell phone from his pocket and dial the police to take in the man. "Better call this in. He won't cause any more harm to anyone," Midoriya said as the phone began to ring in his end. After several minutes of waiting with some heroes from around the area along with the officers scolding him for his sudden actions, they said since it was in self-defense and in helping someone that they would give him a warning. After being asked if he knew what the victim looked like, he could only draw blanks as all he knew they were female, which helped reinforce what the heroes and officers were saying in him jumping without thinking. Either way, he was scolded but still fine that he did something. After collecting the thug and giving some last testimonies, he was allowed to go home. Having his injury having healed, he wouldn't need to go to the hospital, but was asked if he needed to be taken home for safety reasons, to which he said it was fine and was given to take care before everyone went their paths, and Midoriya would once again begin making his way back home as he figured it was enough action for the day. As he was walking, his mind went back to those 2 attacks that he did as he hasn't done them before, almost as if in timing. He would hear Hanzo answer his questions. "Those attacks you did, Midoriya, they were Hellport and Ice Clone." To which Midoriya would respond, "So I figured out more of my abilities?" To which Leon would respond, "It appears so. However, do you remember how you accessed them?" To which Midoriya gave a shaking no as Leon would give it some thought. Perhaps the heat of the moment and seeing that girl in danger must have triggered your quirks to do what came to you by instinct. You wanted to get to the girl quickly, so you teleported and you needed to counter that guy, and it would seem that you managed to counterattack without giving it much thought. Leon said as Midoriya would respond, "In me wanting to help that girl, it helped me figure out more of my abilities." Hanzo would reply, "That would seem like such izuku. However, you will have to train harder in its control. Not teleporting yourself by accident on your first try is impressive, but don't expect all attempts to go as such. Same with the Ice Clone. Plus, the scruffle with the thug helped see what you need to work on still, so we will adjust your training to help on those fronts. Understood?" To which Midoriya gave his response, "Understood. The entrance exam will be in a few months. I have to learn as much as I can before then. If I have to endure more training, then so be it." Izuku said as Hanzo and Leon gave a nod which wouldn't be seen by Midoriya as the green-haired young man would walk down the path. Unbeknownst to him, behind the scene of trees that he was passing by, the silhouette of a girl would pop from behind one of the trees as she was eavesdropping on Midoriya's conversation. "What an odd boy to be talking to himself," she said as she watched the green-haired young man continue to walk down the path back home. "He appears to also be trying out for you. In a few months. Maybe we will see each other again," she said with a small smile on her face as she began walking the opposite direction of Midoriya as the crickets began playing their nighttime songs. Chapter 3, U.A Entrance Exam, Part 1. 7 months would pass since that day, and we come back to a familiar, yet different sight. The sunrise still gave the surrounding area golden tint wherever it touched, but in the 10 months since, Dagoba Beach has returned to its former glory as the sand was now a golden yellow color that was accentuated by the sunrise. The blue waves could be seen sparkling as they clashed with the shores, and the garbage that once littered the area was all but missing. Had one not seen the beach prior, one would assume that it was never there. Well, sort of. There would remain one damaged up the fridge in the center of the beach, and with it was a shirtless green-haired young man who was grunting as his attacks hit the fridge. "Izuku, your movement is getting sloppy. Do it again," Hanzo said as Midoriya readjusted himself as his feet shifted the sand under him. "Right, Master Hanzo," Midoriya said as he once more did the fighting routine. Jabs, strikes, kicks, thrusts, jump kicks, staggering, poking, and jump punches were movements Midoriya did daily for him to have a solid foundation for combat. However, his mind in those months would always go back to that day at the park. While he prevented a criminal from attacking a civilian, he never managed to know who was or if the girl that escaped is okay. He shouldn't dwell too much on it since he managed to give her time to flee and make it to safety, but the possibility of what could have happened to her just kept creeping back into his mind. Didn't ease his concerns when he went to ask the police station if anyone came to give testimony to the crime, which turned out to be no. As he continued this train of thought, his movements began to slow down and were not striking correctly, which he would be called on. "Midoriya, what did I say? Don't doze off when striking," Leon yelled at his descendant. "Right, Grandmaster. My apologies," Midoriya said as he hit with an open left palm, then accumulating some particles of ice into his right palm and struck the same spot, but ice would spread from where his attack hit before throwing a right big boot against it. "Don't apologize. Focus and do your training. You only have a few hours before your test. You would have wasted hours and your time if you don't execute your training correctly," Leon said harshly to his student. which made Midoriya think for a moment as he held onto the words of the Lin K Grandmaster before shifting his expression to one of determination. Grandmaster's right. Today's the day. I've come too far to just end up failing in the end. I can't let all of my hard work go to waste. Midoriya thought as he delivered a right roundhouse kick, which had some embers showing by his foot and shin. 10 grueling months of combat, defense, dodging, countering, and conditioning training that the green-haired young man had endured getting to where he was. It seemed that for each lesson that the Shirai Ryu and Lin K Grandmasters put Midoriya through, another 2 lessons would be brought on for not just the body, but also the mind. Hearing, sensing, feeling, logic, philosophy, and tactics were all taught to the green-haired young man to ensure he was never at a disadvantage and to be cerebral during combat. While still needing refinement in many aspects, the green-haired young man has come a long way since he was taken under the Grandmaster's teachings. Midoriya's body has changed with the help of his masters, becoming more toned and lean but not overly muscular. Despite the tough and ruthless training that Liang and Hanzo, it helped him reach the peak of human performance as he was now stronger and faster than ever before, as he did not have many issues to punch through steel and being able to react to multiple moving objects, such as when his masters told him to throw various sharp objects into the air and making him dodge in the last moment. Questionable training aside, it did allow Midoriya training in his reflexes despite him having failed a few times early on, receiving a few stabs and slashes, which thankfully he recovered. Due to his quirk, though, it was quite an explanation he had to give to his mother when she saw the bloodstains and cuts on him after his training. When it came to training his powers, it was another aspect that pushed Midoriya's mind to the limits as well. Both required him to have some form of concentrated control over cryomancy and hellfire to ensure he was able to control and unlock many of its possibilities. Thus, mental conditioning was required for him to have control of his quirks. Meditation was able to help with his concentration and help keep his mind clear when training with hellfire. As he kept going into the memories of his past to have continued use of hellfire, he became more accustomed to the memories and began growing numb to the pain of his experience, which did help him with control over his powers, and this held for cryomancy, as while it took him a few seconds to summon an ice ball, he was able to form one in about a second. As he grew stronger, so too did his quirks as he continued to unlock more abilities for cryomancy and hellfire. After discovering Ice Clone and Flameport, he would train in their usage, and after trial and error, which involved him accidentally freezing himself inside his ice clone and accidentally teleporting himself inside one of the garbage piles. He gained control over it rather quickly, and after a few days later, he would begin to slowly unlock more abilities for cryomancy and hellfire, and with each one being discovered by accident or ingenuity from Midoriya. "That's enough, Izuku," the green-haired young man heard Hanzo say as he threw one last punch to the fridge with Midoriya panting lightly. "Good. Now let's review what you know of hellfire, Midoriya," he heard Hanzo say as Midoriya gave a nod of understanding as he began to take a deep breath before releasing it slowly. "Right," Midoriya said as he began to do some small stretches to loosen up once more as he planted his feet into the sand, let his arms fall to the side, and began to take small breaths to steady himself. "Fireball," Hanzo said as embers began to surround Midoriya's right arm before condensing into a ball of flames in his palm, at which point he would reel back an arm and threw it at one of the lined-up cans, which would send the small aluminum can flying off. "Flameport," Hanzo said once more as Midoriya would disappear in a puff of smoke and embers and appear on top of the damaged fridge. "Demon Flames," Hanzo said as Midoriya's arms began to be engulfed in flames before raising them, and right under the fridge, a crack would appear on the sand as flames began to come from the bottom of the fridge. Midoriya would hold his arms up for a few moments before lowering them, and thus shutting the flames as well, leaving the bottom of the fridge burned up and turning part of the sandy ground into glass. "Weapon summon. Pick one you're comfortable with, Izuku," Hanzo said as Midoriya would crouch down onto one knee on top of the fridge as small flames and embers began to fly out from his back in the form of an X before the emanate flames began to take form. In the place of the flame, there would be 2 steel swords with a brown leather grip, whereupon Midoriya would reach with both hands and tightly grab onto both handles. He would leap into the air as he focused his sight onto the fridge below, where he would do a spin with both blades as he swung down onto the fridge as the blades would slice vertically with a few sparks flying off from the metal on metal contact. The fridge would remain stationary, almost as if the blades didn't make contact, but if one were to look closely, they would make out the subtle slice marks from the swords. Good. It seems that you improved on the areas that we wanted you to focus on, Hanzo said as the two blades Midoriya had begun to dissolve into flames and were now gone. In the months since the incident, Midoriya began to discover more of his Quirks' abilities which allowed him to vary his attacks, but they still needed refinements such as still needing to control Demon Flame's intensity and needing to summon Fireball faster if he wants to use it at a distance without wanting to be interrupted when fighting. Now Izuku, summon it, Hanzo said, which Midoriya could only groan in annoyance as this aspect of Hellfire was the one he needed the most work on and did not enjoy having to use it, but had to comply with his master's orders. Midoriya would once again engulf his right arm up to his elbow in flames as he would raise it and said his command. Arise. Midoriya yelled as the ground in front of him cracked open and out of it crawled a creature that had horns that twisted on its head. Its flesh was reddish-pink with orange veins flowing through it, clawed hands, spikes on its back, and had orange bright eyes. Another new ability, or rather creature, he gained a Hell Spawn, which after and over almost fell on top of the green-haired young man. Midoriya raised his right arm, which began to engulf in flames, and before he knew it, out of the ground a crack appeared, and the Hellspawn would stop the over from toppling him. Training the Hellspawn would prove to be one of the green-haired young man's least favorite aspects of training, because he would quickly learn that the Hellspawn did not want anything to do with him, and would either ignore their order to come out or throw whatever was close to its vicinity at Midoriya when it did show up. Flashback to one of the training sessions with the Hellspawn. Midoriya thought he had the good luck to finally get the Hellspawn to cooperate and come out of hell, and was facing one of the makeshift dummies made from the garbage. All right, now strike, Midoriya commanded as he raised a hand facing forward to which he saw the Hellspawn do nothing. Good, Midoriya said one more and saw the Hellspawn not move, at which point Midoriya would lower his arm and pinch the bridge of his nose as he would try to reason with the demon from hell. Come on, I know you don't like me, but can you at least do something productive? Midoriya said as he then felt a huge pile of plastic bags falls on top of him, and when looking up he saw the Hellspawn throwing more garbage on top of him as the Hellspawn appeared to be laughing at the situation of the green-haired young man. He's a demon from hell, of course, he won't listen and would enjoy watching me struggle, Midoriya said as this process would repeat itself for several days at a time. Back to present time. It looked directly straight at Midoriya, which if one were to look at both the Hellspawn and Midoriya, they would see the look of annoyance from each. Releasing a sigh, Midoriya decided to get this part of training over with to not waste any more time. Hey, you know the drill, Midoriya told the Hellspawn as the creature would simply just grab the same burnt can of soda from earlier and threw it back at the fridge. Both masters would look at the sight and would rub their foreheads at the relationships between the two. Even after many months, the Hellspawn does not want to cooperate, Hanzo said disappointingly as he saw the Hellspawn throw sand at his descendant as Midoriya would look at the demon in annoyance. From what I have seen from our history of battles, you never had an issue with summoning the Hellspawn, Liang said as he has seen Hanzo cooperate with the Hellspawn and how much it helped Hanzo overwhelm his opponents as they tried predicting where the demon would appear. I was Scorpion when I first encountered the Hellspawn, so there never was an issue. However, this one doesn't seem to see Izuku as one of them despite having Hellfire with him, Hanzo said as he would grab his chin at the situation. Izuku, that's enough. Send the Hellspawn back, Hanzo said, which Midoriya, to extension the demon, were glad to comply as the scene would wrap itself up pretty quickly. Izuku, we know you don't enjoy training with the Hellspawn, and for now you won't have to rely on it for the time being, but it can't go forever, Hanzo said as Midoriya responded. I know, but what exactly do I do with it? I thought just about everything to train with it. I tried talking to it, hang out with it, tried feeding it, and nothing works, Midoriya said with frustration in his tone. We understand, Midoriya, and you'll find your way to handle the Hellspawn. For now, however, You need to continue the last of the training for later. Liang said as Midoriya could only look in somewhat disappointment at his lack in controlling the Hellspawn, but decided to comply with his masters wanting him to continue the training. Midoriya would ditto the steps he did when preparing for Hellfire. Standing in front of the ruined fridge, the green-haired young man waited for the Lin K Grandmaster to give his command. Ice Ball. Liang yelled, to which Midoriya would clasp both palms over one another as blue-white particles began to shine brightly in the middle and taking the form of a crystallized ball. He would then thrust both arms forward with his palms out as the ice ball traveled and hit one of the old cans of soda. Ice Clone. Liang yelled as Midoriya would focus for a moment before jumping back as a cold pressure was released from him, and in front of him stood a statue of himself, but it being Grandparents Blue. Ice Burst. Liang yelled once more as Midoriya would lower his left hand to his side as ice shards and frost began to come out of his arm as a swirl of mist began to glow in his palm. Then, as it began to take form, Midoriya slammed it with his right hand as it would burst out a high pressure of cold wind that not only pushed the sand around him, but also break the statue in front of him. Creeping Ice, Liang said as Midoriya's right leg began to be covered by the same frost as he took a step on the ground, and the columns of ice would point of the ground, which would impact through the fridge. Rising Ice, Liang said as the rest of Midoriya's limbs began to be covered by the icy frost, as he would squat close to the ground and touching the ground, as in a jump a beam of ice would pop from below him, which gave him extra height from the jump before coming down to the ground and seeing the column of ice break as he got to the ground. Good. Now summon your weapons, Midoriya, Liang said as Midoriya, who was breathing rather fast and somewhat heavily, would give a quick as he would put both palms together facing outward in front of him with his right palm on top of his left one. In a moment, a swirl of blue and white particles began shining in his palm, at which point he would semi-close his right palm as he slid his left hand away towards the left as the particles began to shine ever brighter and taking form before solidifying into a transparent blue sword whose blade had various sharp ridges through it, which ensured that whatever gets stuck on the sword won't get out unscathed. After finishing forming, the green-haired young adult would swing horizontally onto the fridge with shredded ice flying from the area of impact. The fridge was becoming more unstable as the more he slices. Needing to finish his training, Midoriya would crush the ice sword into pieces before placing both hands to his right side in a semi-closed form as ice particles began to form in his hands, in which it would quickly solidify into a handle with the top of it being a block of ice behind Midoriya, and thus he forms an ice hammer. Just as quickly as he formed it, Midoriya would lift the ice hammer with ease over his head and smash it into the top of the fridge as it would become flattened with various bolts and shards of metal and ice having flowed from the impact. This was a new ability to his two quirks, which was weapon summoning, and despite them both having different weaponry, with Hellfire having a broadsword, two steel swords, katana, and Ninjato Cryomancy having a sword, daggers, axes, and a hammer, all made out of blue ice. The process of summoning them was similar to one another, which helped him gain an understanding of how to use them to their full capacity. It would take him a few tries before he perfected the summoning. The first few times the blades for Hellfire were either dull or brittle, and Cryomancy being way too jagged and fragile for him utilized correctly. After discovering these abilities, both Grandmasters would alter the green-haired young man's training to incorporate the usage of weapons into his fighting styles. After everything was done, Midoriya would fall to a knee as he was breathing rather heavily from the last bit of his training. Your body seems to still tire from overusage, Midoriya, Liang said as Midoriya could only listen as he tried to catch his breath. We will continue to work on it to improve your endurance in switching from one to the other, but for now it is better to clean up the mess created and rest up for your exam, understood? Hanzo said as Midoriya would respond after finally picking himself up and catching his breath. Understood, Midoriya said as he looked at the small mess created by him. There were chunks of ice and glass he made by accident from the fire, and the chunks of trash from the broken fridge and old cans of soda he used for target practice. Midoriya could tell that despite learning more about his powers, he still needed more control if he wants to make sure that no citizen gets hurt and to prevent collateral damage. The green-haired young man would remain silent for a brief moment before asking a question to his masters. Grandmasters Midoriya asked as both ancestors listened to what their descendant had to say. Do you think I'm ready? Knowing that their descendant meant the entrance exam, they knew that motivation was the way to raise someone's spirit, but they also needed to tell their descendant that not everything is concrete. Deciding on their words, Hanzo would respond. You put in work, Midoriya. Let yourself be the judge of that. To which it would be followed by Leon. Do know that there's a chance for you to fail, Midoriya. But don't try living up to someone else's standards. You are the one that defines you, like I did when I inherited the mantle of Sub-Zero. Leon said as Midoriya perked up at that detail. Wait, you mean you aren't the first? To which Leon would continue. Am not. The name originated with my grandfather, then the name was passed on to my brother Baihan, and then I would carry the name. You had a brother, Grandmaster? I thought Lin K members didn't have families from what you've told me. Which surprised Midoriya, as while his master talked about the clans in general, they never talked about anyone close to them or their families, mostly avoiding the topic when possible or just giving a simple, well, talk about it another time. So anything relating to their family. Yes, Midoriya. However, when I and Baihan joined the Lin K, the way they recruited members was different from how I would later conduct them. We were abducted from our home as kids. That was a way the Lin K was able to replenish their numbers if they suffered losses. For the longest time, he was the only family I had at the Lin K temple. He helped train my cryomancy and would carry our grandfather's name while I carried the code name Tundra. Midoriya could only listen as his master revealed this. He knew that being a clan of assassins already carried the likeliness of experiencing horrible things, but to know that even as kids his master had to experience these things just made him wonder what has his master endured in his lifetime. But what happened to Baihan? Did he leave the Lin K and you then carry the name on? During the first iteration, no one leaves the Lin K without facing consequences of desertion, Midoriya. There's only one way you leave the clan, and that is death. Liang said as his tone seemed heavy as he finished his sentence. I'm sorry, Grandmaster. I didn't think. Midoriya apologized to and began to realize that he hasn't heard Hanzo throughout the whole conversation, but he could hear him sigh in the back of his mind. Did something bother Master Hanzo about Grandmaster's explanation, Midoriya thought as Liang began to talk. Don't apologize, Midoriya. I never told you this. However, I tell you this because, like you, I didn't know if I would live up to the title of Sub-Zero, if I would even come close to what my brother was capable of. But as I grew older and wiser, the question would be forgotten as I stopped defining myself after what my brother did as Sub-Zero, but took the name and made it my own. You are the one to decide if you are ready, Midoriya. The answer is on you. Liang finished as Midoriya could only remain thinking of what his master said, and if he truly was ready. He had two powerful and versatile quirks for sure and has a good handle on them, but they still need refinements. He has trained for today. He can't let doubt cloud his thoughts on whether he is ready or not. His masters, his parents. He had people that believed in him after so long of never having anyone. Going towards what remained of the fridge, Midoriya would pick up the fragments and give his response. I think I am. To which Hanzo and Liang would nod at the response of their student, ensuring that he doesn't doubt when he will have to show the fruits of his efforts. Good. Now clean the remainder of the mess, then rest up, Midoriya. You'll need to rest up, Liang said. Right. A few hours later at the front gate of Udade. After finishing cleaning up the beach and feel pride in knowing he finally cleaned up the remainder of the beach, the green-haired young man would use the time before to shower before taking a small rest with a quirk breakfast courtesy of his loving mother, who wished him the best of luck. Midoriya would arrive at the massive structure that each side was chapped in an H in windows. He was standing at the front of the blue gate with the letters Udada plaque in gold. Midoriya could only stand there mesmerized by the building before he was brought out of his thought process when he felt a sudden shove from his right side. Out of the fucking way, DKU. Midoriya heard as he saw the ashy blonde explosive young man push past him in the same black uniform as him. Midoriya readjusted the strap to his yellow backpack as he could only stare at the ashy blonde. Despite Bakugos and others having lessened their abuse on him since Midoriya would not respond to their intimidations, Bakugo was the one who would constantly throw insults his way, wanting the greenette to react, but would always either shrug it off or ignore it. Unbeknownst to Bakugo, it was getting a reaction from Midoriya as it would make him grow more frustrated the more he tried to provoke him. Midoriya would clench the strap of his backpack as he could only stare at their direction the blonde pass through before being called on by Hanzo. Let it go, Izuku. We understand your growing frustrations towards the boy, but you can't let your mind be clouded with it today. Hanzo said as Midoriya took a deep breath as he lessens his grip on his backpack. You're right. It's not worth it, Midoriya said as he looks at the building once more. Good, now continue. Otherwise you may be late for your exam, Liang said as Midoriya began to take a step forward as would trip in a bit of uneven pavement as he began to suddenly see the ground coming fast. Despite being trained by two of the realm's strongest warriors who faced against the most unimaginable of enemies, he still couldn't stop himself from tripping over a dip. However, right as he was about to hit the ground, he began to feel weightless as if gravity was turned off on him and would see that the ground was not coming to his face anymore. I'm sorry I used my quirk on you, he heard a happy voice say as he would turn his head to the source of the voice. It was a girl that had brown hair in the form of a bob with bangs framing her face, had brown eyes, a brown coat on, had a skirt with black stockings on and brown shoes. He also notices that her face was a bit round with her cheeks having a bit of pink. He would begin to feel the girl move his body around so that he was now standing straight. And release, she said as she pressed her fingertips together, which Midoriya saw had small pads on them, and as she released, Midoriya would feel gravity take into effect once more. It would be bad luck to fall right before the test, she said happily as Midoriya could only look at the girl as his face was beginning to grow a shade of red when looking at the girl as one thought kept going through his mind. Holy crap, she's cute, the greenette thought as despite having had his confidence build up and not be as nervous of a wreck as he was before, he still was prone to be nervous when confronted by a girl. Midoriya would see her tilt her head to the side, which added to her cuteness as she looked at the green-haired young man in confusion. You okay? She asked as Midoriya would respond rather quickly. Yes, very good, he said with his face ever glowing red as Midoriya could feel that Hanzo and Liang Big were face-palming at how the greenette was handling himself. Well, we better hurry. Don't want to be late for our test now, she said as she made her way past the entrance, at which point Midoriya would release a breath he didn't know he was holding on to which he heard Hanzo and Liang also sigh at the same time. Even after working on your confidence, you still have trouble communicating with other girls, Liang said as Midoriya could only look away in embarrassment at the comment. Two can't help it. I never know how to deal or handle these situations, Midoriya said as his old habit of stuttering was showing once more. Okay, first, calm down, Izuku, and second, it's natural for you to react that way, however, do make sure it does improve so that it doesn't compromise your abilities, Hanzo said as Midoriya would nod in agreement as he would begin to move towards the building as to not arrive late for the exam. One written exam later. After finishing up the first portion of the exam, which was not much of an issue for the greenette as he made sure to not to only train his body, all of those who were taking the exam were moved into an auditorium, where upon entering they were handed out cards that had their information such as name and schools along with a letter next to it. Seeing around on those who were taking the exam, he noticed how only he and Bakugo were the only ones there from their school, which he didn't know how to express, but decided to just focus on what may be going on rather than the burning glare he could feel Bakugo giving him from next to him, as it was very evident that he wasn't pleased. As the last few people entered, the lights turned out, and out in the center of the stage came out a tall, thin, blonde-haired man with a mustache who was wearing a black jacket with an upturned collar with studs, had tan, studded shoulder pads, black pants with a red studded belt, black boots, and black fingerless gloves. Around his neck, he had a device that looked to be in the form of speakers, which Midoriya realized that it was the voice hero, Present Mike. What's up, you data candidates? Thanks for tuning in to me, your school DJ. Come on, and let me hear ya. Present Mike shouted, which was reciprocated with a dead silence, which if a pin was dropped, there was certain that it would echo across the room. Tough crowd, huh? That's fine. They'll skip straight to the point. Let's talk about how the practical portion is going to happen. Are y'all ready? Present Mike shouted once more, and again it was met with silence. Anyways, as your application says, today you will be out there conducting mock battles in an urban site for 10 minutes. You'll head to your specified battle center, Present Mike said as Midoriya looked down at his card and then glanced at Bakugo's card and saw that he's had the letter A. I see. They're splitting you all up. Midoriya heard Hanzo say, which Midoriya would murmur back. Yeah, it appears so. Not only are our numbers one after the other, but we are assigned a different battle center. To which Liang would respond. It's likely to ensure that everyone is pulling their weight and not working off of someone like friends. The Lin K Grandmaster said, which made Midoriya look to the side to where Bakugo sat as the thought back to win to a distant memory of when they were kids and were friends. Friends, huh? Midoriya thought before Bakugo looked at him with a death glare. Get your eyes off my damn card, Deku. Damn, I was looking forward to crushing you. Bakugo said as Midoriya would look back to the front as he decided not to deal with Bakugo as he chose to ignore the comment. Remain calm, Izuku. Remember to maintain control of your emotions and thoughts. Hanzo said, which Midoriya chose to listen as he shouldn't let emotions drive his thoughts. You're right, Master Hanzo. Midoriya said as he listened back to the front as Present Mike presented a board with 3 silhouettes that were being projected. Okay, let's check out your targets. There are 3 kinds of bots made from our support course in each zone. Depending on which one you take down, determines the points you get based on their difficulty, so if you choose to go after the 1-pointers, they'll be easier to take down, but you'll have to go after more, while 3-pointers are harder to take down, but you won't have to fight as many. To which Liang would communicate to Midoriya. Midoriya, we know you may want to go after the higher pointer bots. Strike any bot that you encounter. Also, we suggest helping others if they are in need, understood? To which Midoriya would nod at. Yes, Grandmaster. At which point someone would raise their hand a few rows in front of Midoriya. Yes, Examinee 7111? Present Mike asked as he stood up. May I ask a question? Hit it. Present Mike responded. On the printout, there are 4 types of villains. If that is a misprint, then U.A, the most prominent school in Japan, should be ashamed of that foolish mistake. We, examinees, are here in this place because we wish to be molded into exemplary heroes. The individual said as Midoriya would see him standing and notice him be quite tall with navy blue hair and glasses, at which point he would look in Midoriya's general direction. And you over there, the one with curly hair. The tall man said, which Midoriya would look around to see if anyone else had curly hair, which turned out to just be him, but just to make sure he looked back and pointed to himself. Me? To which the tall man would continue. You have been muttering this whole time about a master and grandmaster. It is extremely distracting. If you are not taking this seriously, then I suggest you leave. The man said, which made the greenette embarrass as he didn't keep his conversation silent enough. To which he would try to frantically give a small bow. Apologies. Won't happen again. I'm sorry. Midoriya said, which seemed to bring a chuckle from the other test takers, including Bakugo, who seemed to find amusement in the green nets singling out. During which time Midoriya would hear Hanzo and Liang communicate to him. We apologize as well as Izuku. Hanzo said. We can continue afterward, Midoriya. Don't respond, just listen. Liang said as he finished, just to make sure Midoriya didn't respond, which he didn't. After that small distraction, Present Mike would continue with the presentation. Thank you for the question, as we were getting to that. The 4th villain type is worth 0 points. Think of it as more of an obstacle rather than a target. There's one in every zone, and while not impossible to defeat, it's recommended that you avoid it even though it's worth 0 points. Present Mike said, finishing his explanation on the 4th knot. I see. Well, thank you, and please excuse the interruption. The tall man said as he sat down. Well, that's all that can be said. Finally, I present to you our school motto. The hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Present Mike said once more, to which it was met with a final silence. Damn, can't catch a break. Midoriya thought as people began filling out of the auditorium to go to their test sites. Battle Zone B. After being released, Midoriya and the other examines were transported to their test site, which upon arriving they were met by a large gate which held behind it a literal city-sized test zone with buildings and roads, which kept surprising not only the green-haired young man, but also the 2 grandmasters, seeing how much preparation the university went to make these tests. Midoriya and the others were allowed to change into more comfortable clothes, which for Midoriya consisted of a turquoise-colored tracksuit with white lines running down it and his red shoes. As everyone waited for the beginning of the second phase, Midoriya would stretch the joints in his shoulders and bend down to stretch his legs as he heard Liang and Hanzo talking to him. Remember, Izuku, pace yourself. Don't waste all of your energy at the start. Right. Don't overexert myself and only use my quirks sparingly, got it? Midoriya said back confidently. Heed the warning, Midoriya. You are stronger than you were before, but this trial will require endurance from you, not just strength. Liang said to Midoriya as he responded with a nod as he finished stretching. The greenette would look around at the other members and would catch the notice of the brown-haired girl from earlier. Hey, the girl from earlier. The luck that we got put on the same site. Midoriya thought. I should thank her for earlier. Didn't have much of a chance last time we met. Midoriya thought as he needed to work on his interactions. As he proceeded to take a step forward, he felt a firm hand on his right shoulder that halted his movement. He would turn around to see the same tall man from earlier looking steely at him. Oh man, not him. Midoriya thought. That girl is trying to concentrate. First, you distract everyone, and now you are trying to sabotage another examinee. To which Midoriya was about to respond to correct him, but before he had a chance, Midoriya would hear the sound of a lock opening along with a loud buzzer. Easy. At that moment, Midoriya would pull away from the navy-haired grip as he began to sprint his way through the entrance. The other examinees would just stare as the green net ran through the gate. Did that guy just run before the exam start? Is that guy an idiot? Wait, shouldn't he be disqualified for cheating? This was some of the responses from the other examinees as the sight of the green net left their view as he ran further into Battle Zone B. What are y'all waiting for? Real life doesn't have a countdown. The exam began. Go. President Mike yelled at the standing test takers as realization finally began to hit them, and the sound stampeding young adults would begin to become the dominant sound. Going back to Midoriya, he continued running until he came across 3 one-pointer bots who immediately set their sights on the green net. All right, pace myself, Midoriya thought to himself as flames began to come out his back, and his dual swords would come out. Reaching behind for his right sword, Midoriya swung at the first one-pointer horizontally. Looking at the second bot, Midoriya would grab his left sword and slice diagonally. Running towards the last bot, Midoriya would jump above as he buried the 2 swords on top of the one-pointer as it fell to the ground. Looking at his surroundings, Midoriya saw as loose gears and screws began to litter the ground as smoke came out of the now destroyed bots. Pulling his swords out of the one-pointer, he would place the swords back on his back. That's 3 points, Midoriya said as he began to hear the sound of the other test takers approaching. Better move fast, the greenette said as he disappeared in smoke and embers. Chapter 3, U.A Entrance Exam, Part 2. As the exam was taking its course, in a darkroom there would be various monitors and individuals looking at many individuals who seemed to have caught the attention of the viewers. In this practical exam, the examinees have not been informed of the number of villains or their locations. They have a limited amount of time in a vast area, said a small white figure that sat on a chair. Being able to analyze and gather information showing a tall man with silver hair that hangs over their face with their mouth covered as the limbs in their arms morph into eyes and ears. Being able to mobilize and adapting to the situation. Another monitor would focus on the navy-haired glasses man from before as he sped his way through the city and kicking his way through various one-pointers. Being able to maintain calm in the heat of the moment. The monitor switched to a blonde man with a white frilly shirt who was shooting a blue sparking laser from a device around their waist as the incoming swarm of bots were decimated by them without a hint of fear and radiating confidence. And showing combat capabilities. The white creature said lastly, as in another monitor, a familiar spiky-haired ashy blonde was shown to be on a pile of burned-up, warped, and decimated pile of bots, as they were now piles of scrap metal being what remained of Bakugo's destructive path. Using each of these distinguishes those who are doing the minimum and those who are striving for something more. The white creature said as the monitors continue to switch between different participants. It seems like this year it has brought an interesting batch. Nizu said, a man who was blocky in body shape and white. That is certain Cementos, and there seem to be those who impress. The white creature known as Nizu said as two monitors focused on Bakugo and another on a running Midoriya as he came across another one-pointer and slicing through it. Okay, that should be about 20 points now. Midoriya thought as he sheathed his sword back and continued running through the streets as he was taking out any bot he came across. As he made it into another street opening, he saw the same brown-haired girl from earlier, looking quite tired and groggy, being toured over by a two-pointer. Without much thinking, he teleported to her just as the two-pointer was about to strike with its tail like Stinger, managing to catch it just in time with both blades in an X-shaped defense. Back at the observation room, some of the staff there took notice, especially a skeleton-looking man and a scruffy black-haired man, as Nizu would be the first to comment. Even in a situation where everyone is trying to get themselves through, some will stop what they're doing to go help others without a thought. Gasped Midoriya heard from the girl behind him as he began to lose his footing against the faux villain. Jayair, Midoriya yelled as he pushed back, slicing the tail that was caught in between his blades as sparks flew off the two-pointer, disarming it. Now's your chance. Midoriya yelled to the girl as he turned around, but he was pushed back by one of the two-pointer's arms as he would crash through one of the buildings. But sometimes, having a plan is just as important. A groggy voice came from the corner of the room as he looked at the hole where the examiner crashed through. Going back to the action, we see Midoriya, flat on the ground, raising a hand towards his head as he runs his palm over his forehead. Ugh, man, that hurt. Ack, Midoriya thought as he looked down and saw that his swords accidentally cut him in the side as some blood was leaking, though it wasn't deep, thankfully. However, it did not mean it didn't sting. Relax, Midoriya. It's just a flesh wound, Liang said. Just give it a moment, Izuku. Also remember to remain aware and to not drop your guard. Hanzo said with both concern and scolding as Midoriya yet again dropped his guard, to which Midoriya would just place a hand around the cut. Sigh, thank goodness for healing. Midoriya thought as the cuts began to close up, and he began to sit up as he looked at the hole he created. Hey man, are you okay? Midoriya heard from outside as he then saw the girl and a guy standing there. Oh, thank goodness you're okay. I thought you might have been seriously hurt. He heard the brown-haired girl say as Midoriya felt the guy grab his hand and was beginning to pull him up. Yeah, no kidding. That was valiant of you to jump in, bro. But are you okay? You took a nasty crash. Midoriya heard the guy say as his vision was finally clearing up and took in the two people. The guy was a bit taller than him, had silver hair that slicked back, and around his eyes he seemed to have very bushy eyelashes. Yeah, I'm fine, just a bit shaken, but I'm good, Midoriya said as he shook his head for any dust or rubble that might have gotten on his hair. That's good. We'll better keep up. Gotta keep up if we want to get into you. Right, the guy said as he ran off around the corner of the building. Here, let me help. Midoriya heard as he would stop shaking his head as he turned to look at the voice and took notice that while the two girls looked similar, she wasn't the same girl as her hair's bangs covered her face, so he couldn't see her eyes. She was slightly shorter as well, and her face wasn't as round as the other girl, and had he not been rattled by him crashing through the wall, he probably would be a bumbling mess. Bend down a little, she asked as she waved a hand at him. Oh, yes, sure. Midoriya responded as he bent slightly as she patted away at his head as chunks of bricks and woods began falling out, and after a few moments she stopped. They are all done, she said as Midoriya would look at her and give a small bow to her. Thank you, he said as he looking at the bot behind her. He saw it was covered in various mushrooms of sizes, shapes, and colors. Huh, neat. Guess that must be her quirk. Wonder what was that guy's quirk? Midoriya thought as he focused back on the girl. It's no problem, she said nervously, which caught Midoriya by surprise at the sudden nervousness from the girl. Huh, didn't expect her to be nervous. Midoriya thought as Hanzo and Liang could only look back and forth between his descendant and the girl as they felt some sort of déjà vu from how the girl's attitude changed from confident to nervous. Anyways, I wish you good luck on the rest of the test, and hopefully I won't do anything stupid. Midoriya said he teleported to a rooftop to get a better vantage point on where to find other bots, which luckily wasn't too long as he found a group of them. However, He unknowingly teleported himself at the center of 3 two-pointers, 5 one-pointers, and 1 three-pointer that seemed to have taken their priority onto him. Ugh, I had to open my mouth. Midoriya thought as he looked at the bots around him. Back in the observation room, everything could only look dumbfounded at the mistake that the green-haired young man put himself in. Well, the boy's screwed. A man with a mask and hat said as everyone saw the monitor. You can certainly say that again. Didn't expect to see a Tenway today. A woman with long dark hair that reached down to their waist said as those in the room got a sweat drop to form at the comment. Midnight. Cementos said, to which Midnight replied with a waving hand. Yeah, no flirting with the students. But hey, their age of consent. She said, which made those in the room sweat drop even more and others to just focus their attention back to the monitor. The 3 two-pointer bots launched themselves towards the green net. Midoriya's arms and legs began to be encased in bluish ice as a pillar of ice appeared under him as he bounced out of the way, just in time as the 3 bots crashed into one another. At the observation room, the staff was at the very least surprised at the showing of Midoriya, as while ice and fire-based quirks weren't necessarily uncommon, it was that getting 2 quirks is what surprised them. It was here that the mask and hat wearer broke the silence. That kid's quirk, what is it anyway? He said, which was responded by the scruffy-haired staff member. In his quirk registry, he calls it Hellfire and Cryomancy. Seems it allows him to manipulate or manifest things out of fire and ice. Other important details say that it gives him small regenerative ability along with endurance. He said, which piqued everyone's attention as they heard the name of the quirk, as there is already someone with a quirk named Hellfire. The skeleton blonde-looking man would be the first to ask the question. Hellfire? Like Endeavors? Is young Midoriya by any chance related to him, Aizawa? He asked, which got him a quick response. Short answer. No, the man said, which made the cowboy hat-wearing man look at Aizawa. What made you certain? He asked with curiosity. Because Snipe, one of the kids' names, is Midoriya. Name-wise, there doesn't seem to be anyone from either family that shared the name Todoroki or Midoriya. Going by just that information wouldn't mean much. However, looking at family members, there doesn't seem to be any connection to either family, either work-related, hero-related, family-related. Aside from similar quirks, the two don't seem to have much in relations with one another, which seemed to cover most evidence for Snipe. Aizawa, how did you? If these examinees are likely going to be our students, a background check on them is needed to ensure that we are not dealing with someone who isn't trying. Aizawa responded as attention was brought back to the screen with Midoriya, though Aizawa couldn't help but feel as if he was missing one small detail that he had not discovered yet. Back at the battle zone, Midoriya, who was now airborne, pulled both blades out of his back as he drove both on top of one of the 2 pointers, at which point the 3-pointer launched its concussion missiles at the green-haired young man. Using Hellport to get himself out of the way, the blast of the missiles destroyed the 2-pointer along with his swords, and with him being on top of the 3-pointer, Midoriya would inhale air as the top portion of his body began to turn into a transparent orange color, revealing his bones much to the surprise of the Uda staff upon seeing this move. Before exhaling a stream of fire right on top of the 3-pointer, he was talking on. Demon breath was beginning to melt through the steel sheets of the 3-pointer, at which Midoriya seized his fire, feeling his throat sore and burning from the attack, and began to feel the machine shaking. Crap, didn't think through with that plan. Midoriya thought as he jumped off the machine as it exploded. 2 bots were down, but Midoriya still had a long way to go. Knowing he'll have to go all out if he wants to get through, Midoriya ran once more towards the group of 1-pointers as he used his shoulder bash to push himself against them. Using the small ice covering as a shield, Midoriya allowed it to take one of the 1-pointers' attacks as he began to summon 2 ice axes in both hands. The 1-pointers would break through the ice shield, but Midoriya had his weapons ready as he continued to slide forward on the trail of ice as he began swinging the axes on the bots. Left, right, up, down, Midoriya sliced through 4 of the 1-pointer before one of the ice axes would break off, and now only 1 1-pointer and 2 2-pointers were left as Midoriya could feel himself growing tired as the more he relied on his quirks to summon more weapons and elements. I need to end this fast, Midoriya thought as the 1-pointer launched itself at him, which he would jump into the air to avoid the attack. Using the small opportunity, he would throw the ice axe down at the one-pointer and would manage to nail its target as the weapon buried itself on it. However, as he was now on the air, Midoriya barely took notice as the remaining two-pointers had their stingers aimed right at him. Thinking quickly, Midoriya would put both palms together as a whirl of bluish ice began to take form at the center, where he would release the ice ball on the two-pointers and successfully froze the two bots, getting a sigh of relief from the green-haired young man. However, it was short-lived as he began to hear the ice start to break, and the one-pointer who he threw the ice axe at was still operational. Midoriya began to summon an ice hammer, during which, using what he had left, he swung down onto the two-pointers before they broke out of the ice, crushing them. Quickly letting go of the ice hammer, Midoriya would shift his focus to the one-pointer. Running up to it, Midoriya would grab the small ice axe and pull it out of the one-pointer's body just as it threw one of its limbs at Midoriya. Seeing his chance, Midoriya would reel his arm back, and using the amplification to strengthen his throw, Midoriya would throw the ice axe and see as it goes through the one-pointer, slicing it in half, and thus ending the small ambush. Pant, that should be the last one, Midoriya said as he fell to the ground as he tried to steady his breath and rubbing his throat. Back at the observation room, Minnie saw the green net make it through the various bots. Aizawa saw the boy and could only sigh as while he got himself out of that ambush, he got himself into that situation in the first place. Well now, seems like the test is about to come to an end soon. Power loader, if you may, Nizu said as a man who had a yellow helmet that looked like that from equipment used in construction would press a button. Midoriya was exhausted, to say the least. He wasn't planning on tiring himself out quickly, but he either took some damage or spent too much stamina and energy fighting to get a breather. Midoriya, the greenette, heard Liang say. Yeah, I know, I tired myself out too quickly, got too reckless, and shouldn't do it again, Midoriya said before Hanzo responded. We were going to say you did great in thinking quickly and getting yourself out of that mess, Hanzo said, which surprised Midoriya considering that both Grandmaster, while they did praise him when he did learn, still did scold him more often due to him repeating mistakes, so maybe he did well today. However, there it is. There's still some refinement to be made. You keep dropping your defense and are relying too much on your quirks. That's why we train in combat, to ensure you don't tire yourself from overusing them, Hanzo said as Midoriya could only sit there and listen to the scolding. Regardless, Midoriya, you still managed to pull yourself out without our help, so we commend you for it. Just make sure you don't push yourself or drop your guard, Liang said as Midoriya got up from the ground. Right, Grandmaster, Midoriya said as he looked at the street below and saw it littered with broken scrap metals and people running around. It looks like the test is almost coming to a close, Midoriya said as he used flame port to get himself down, but did not stick to landing as he would once more land on his butt. Guess this is what Hanzo and Liang meant when they said to not overwork myself, Midoriya said as while in training, he never overexerted himself in using both quirks due to his masters regulating his training. He seems to be having some issue with concentrating on using them now. Well, no use complaining about for now, Midoriya said as he picked himself up. Now you understand what we meant, Midoriya, he heard Liang say. Yai's Grandmaster. Guess I should rest up now and wait for the announcement to call the end of the exam. And why is the ground suddenly shaking? Midoriya said as he began to feel the ground shake even more as some of the other test takers were also feeling the shake and began to lose their footing. Looking up, he would see giant robotic arms grab onto one of the taller structures in the city. That's the zero-pointer, Midoriya said as he looked at what he could describe as a green Mechagodzilla that was a dark green color with a rectangular head with a bunch of red lights covering its face. It seemed to set its eyes onto the crowd of testers as soon everyone close was running and screaming past the greenette, including the tall, serious person. Help, Midoriya heard as it brought him out of his shock state as he followed the source of the sound. He would see the brown-haired girl who helped him earlier in the day was stuck underneath some rubble as the zero-pointer seemed to approach her. Without much thinking, Midoriya began to run towards the girl, getting odd looks from everyone who was running the opposite direction, but at that point, he didn't care if he was looked at. All he had in his mind was to get to the girl. The zero-pointer would seem to catch his presence as Midoriya could see it moving its head towards where he was going. The zero-pointer would throw a fist strike right at Midoriya, The green-haired young man continued running as some ice barely started forming around his arms as Midoriya attempted to focus as much of his energy in making shoulder bash into some form of a shield, which proves to be in vain as it would very thin and small in shape and size. The zero-pointer's attack proves to be too strong as the small shield would not stand the attack, and Midoriya was pushed down into the ground as the green net got buried under fragments of concrete and broke ice. The zero-pointer was prepared to reel back its fist once more to strike down on the down green net, which as the brown-haired girl saw began to grow scared at what could happen to the green-haired young man. She kept looking at the area where the green net was struck, and suddenly she began to feel her surroundings feel cold, and she noticed that where the green net was, ice and fire was slowly forming around the area. She was brought out of her observation as she heard the gears and mechanisms of the zero-pointer, as she saw its arm move to attack the green-haired young man, but as its approach, she saw as ice began to form at a rapid pace into a sphere where Midoriya was. It was a very white shade of ice, and as the zero-pointer hit the ice, it broke the barrier between the bot and the boy, but the arm of the bot would begin to turn into a similar shade of white as frost began to cover its arm up to its main body. She was wondering what was happening until she began to see the broken ground begin to move as it was followed by a shout. "Jaiya, I won't let you hurt her." The examinees heard as the ground suddenly burst with ice and flames as out of the hole came out Midoriya, who looked to barely be hanging on by a thread as his clothes were dirted and had some cut on them, as he had some blood coming from the cuts. The zero-pointer's right arm was beginning to thaw its way out of the ice as it would strike Midoriya with its other remaining arm. Using as much of hellfire he could muster, he began to feel drowsy as he increased the intensity. Putting both palms together to form a fireball, he split up the attack as he ran towards the bot. Midoriya would barely dodge its left strike as Midoriya would use Flameport to jump on top of the arm to avoid the attack. Seeing an opening, he threw one of the fireballs at its right shoulder joint and then to its left shoulder joint, whereupon contact the fireball would melt through it and cause both of its arms to fall to the ground. Midoriya jumped to the ground in front of the bot, taking a breath in knowing that it won't cause harm anymore, until he began to hear a loud beeping sound that was slow at first before gradually getting faster. He looked at the head of the zero-pointer and see the red lights blinking before one solidifies into a red light. "Well, that ain't good," Midoriya thought. "Izuku, you need to finish it now." He heard both grandmasters yell at him, and realizing what may happen if the bot's countdown ends, Midoriya began to focus more of hellfire once more as now he began to feel lightheaded at the energy as more memories began to flow back at him. His right arm began to show embers and flames, and threw his arm forward towards the main body. However, as he did, a long chain would fly out of his arm at a rapid pace with the point embedding itself into the zero-pointer, as the chain was white with an orange glow and the sound of sizzling ringing in his ears. "What the?" Midoriya thought as he looked at the chain, but the beeping of the zero-pointer caught his attention once more as it was increasing with speed. Not wasting any more time, Midoriya put everything he had into his legs as he continues to dwell further into hellfire. The chain continues to grow as Midoriya made his jump over the bot. Once he reached the backside of the zero-pointer, he began to hear the beeping sound faster along with a glow happening in the opposite side as the shouts and screams began to grow louder. Pulling more from hellfire as he continued to grow stronger, he could feel himself losing more consciousness as he began to recap many memories from his childhood, to the bullying, the insults, the beatings, the constant berating, and provocations were the thoughts that were taking over the green-net's mind as he got closer to the ground. He began to feel something in him telling him that it's okay to get some rest, and as he closes his eyes, he plunged straight through the ground where magma would come out of it. Observation room. Those in the room could only watch as one of the participants was doing something which they couldn't tell against the zero-pointer with a chain, and as they worried that the green-haired young man would plunge to his death, he fell through the ground with the chain still intact as it began to travel in between the zero-pointer towards the front with the chain tightening onto the bot. "What exactly is that boy trying to do?" Cementos asked, as everyone could only stare at the monitor that showed the only person to go against the zero-pointer. "That is a good question. What exactly is young Midoriya planning to do?" The skeleton-looking man said as the ground in front of the zero-pointer erupted with Midoriya, whose body seemed to be engulfed in flames, was holding onto the chain in hand as the beeping of the zero-pointer began to come to a close as he was at eye level with the bot. Then, grabbing the chain with firmness, Midoriya would pull the chain with everything he had. "Get over here." Whereupon the zero-pointer would split in half and begin to implode onto itself. The Udata staff and examinees could only witness the scene in front of them as the zero-pointer started falling into a blaze of glory, taking some of the buildings behind it. While the focus was on the exploding bot, Midoriya began falling to the ground with the chain reeling itself back into Midoriya as he was coming close to the ground. However, they would see a brown-haired girl get on top of a broken-down bot as she raised herself off the ground and managed to halt the falling of the green-haired young man just as he was about a few meters of the ground before both she and the green net landed safely on the ground. "Well, this was certainly a surprise," Nizu said as the monitor lingered on the pair of young adults. Back on the battle zone, the brown-haired girl, after having emptied the contents of her stomach from overusing her quirk, would be watching over the green net as she took in his features. His hair was curly and had 4 freckles on each side of his face. His tracksuit was in bad conditions, but looking at the green young man at a closer inspection, she noticed that his injuries were closing up along with any other bruise he may have received. The navy-haired man would observe the two as he was trying to think why the green net ran on and fought the zero-pointer even though it did not have any points of value and it was recommended that they avoid it. He kept trying to figure out until he landed on a thought that maybe he figured out something hidden in the exam, that maybe there was a portion that was neglected to be mentioned by the university to ensure that people did well out of their selflessness rather than out of selfish desire. It all started making sense as to why the green net would attack the zero-pointer, had he known about the hidden portion. "I would have done the same," he said out loud as he thought he hit it on the nail. "Okay, good work to everyone. Here, Sonny, have some gummies," a short elderly woman said as she handed the tall man some green and red gummy bears. "Thank you, ma'am," the tall, serious guy said as the elderly woman made her way towards the pair. She would look at the brown-haired girl. "Are you injured, Sonny?" the elderly woman asked as the girl gave a nod, which soon got her a kiss from the elderly lady, and the area where she sprained her leg was showing a green glow. "That's amazing," the girl said. "That's the youthful heroine. Recovery girl for you," the three heard a voice say, and they saw the green-haired young man push himself off the ground and get on a sitting crisscross position. He would rub his eyes for a bit and blink as both the tall, serious young man and the brown-haired girl observe as his eyes faded from white sclera to emerald-colored irises. "Are you okay, Sonny? Do you need me to heal you?" Recovery girl asked as Midoriya shakes his head. "Yeah, I'm okay. A bit tired, but any injuries I should be fine. My quirks give me some healing properties, so I should be okay," Midoriya said as the girl and tall guy could only look at the green net as questions raced through their heads since they saw him use fire and ice. Now he's saying he can heal. "Okay, but I will still like to do a checkup to ensure that there isn't any permanent damage. You did do quite a number on yourself against the zero-pointer," Recovery girl said as Midoriya head tilted to the side. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I remember throwing a long chain, but I don't remember what happened after that," Midoriya said as he rubbed his head, to which the tall guy would ask. "Wait, do you don't remember destroying the zero-pointer?" the serious guy asked while flailing his hands in a robotic fashion, which brought amusement from Midoriya, but then realized what he said. "Wait, I did what?" Midoriya said as he felt a tap on his shoulder and saw the brown-haired girl as she pointed to the massive pile of scrap metal and smoke that covered the rest of the street. "What exactly did I do?" Midoriya thought as he could only look at the destruction. He would be brought out of thought as he felt the girl talk to him once more. "Thank you for helping me," she said, which Midoriya just put both hands up and waving. "No problem. I'm just glad you are safe," Midoriya said, which brought a smile from the girl and a look of understanding from the tall, serious guy as he may have misunderstood the green net. "All right. Everyone who doesn't require medical assistance, please make your way back to the entrance and wait until further notice," Recovery girl announced as Midoriya would pick himself up and see the girl walk away with the rest of the examinees. But as Midoriya began to walk as well, he began to hear the voices of Hanzo and Leong. "Midoriya, are you all right? Do you feel anything wrong?" Liang said worryingly as Midoriya raised an eyebrow. No, I'm okay, exhausted and don't remember what happened after running at the zero-pointer, but I'm okay. Midoriya said as Hanzo would answer back. Izuku, I told you not to overexert yourself, that you shouldn't overuse Hellfire otherwise you will face dire consequences. Hanzo said loudly as Midoriya could only cringe at the volume. Luke, I'm sorry, Master Han. Sorry isn't going to cut it, Izuku. You are fortunate it was a robot that you were hellbent on destroying. What if it was an actual person? Huh, different story, right, because that is on you. Hanzo said as Midoriya could only listen to his master's scolding. Hanzo, I understand you are mad, but nothing, Liang. We warned him, and he still went ahead and ignored our warning. Hanzo said as he released a heavy sigh. He is fortunate it was a robot he let go of his anger on. He still has a lot to learn, Liang, and you know it as well. Hanzo said to his equal. We will continue this discussion later, Midoriya. Follow the others and finish what is left. We will continue training back in a few days. Hanzo said as Liang would release a sigh before addressing Midoriya. It's better to listen to Midoriya. I'll talk to you in time, Liang said before he went silent. Wait, Hanzo, Liang. But by the time he requested their answer, the two grandmasters would not talk anymore. Midoriya could only look down ahead at the ground in confusion and disappointment as he didn't know what to do right now, but just do what was last asked of him and follow the group of examinees and wait until his grandmasters answered back. 2 days later, Hanzo and Liang did not respond to Midoriya for the next 2 days, and with the U.A entrance result not coming in until later, Midoriya had a lot on his mind to worry about. Right now, Midoriya was sitting down on his chair as he summoned the kunai weapon from the exam. While he wasn't able to remember everything that happened, it felt natural for him when he summoned the kunai that first night, almost as if my memory. He would mostly observe the kunai as he would twist it and turn it around in his hand, looking at the details such as it being black, how the grip was brown leather, and the handle fitting perfectly into his palm. He would throw it up in the air and catch it as it came down. That was how he spent his time for the past 2 days. Midoriya would once more prepare to throw the kunai into the air. Greetings, Izuku. Midoriya heard. Ah! Midoriya yelped as it would startle him and got him to throw the kunai straight up onto the air as it buried itself in the ceiling in which the sound was caught by his mom. Izuku, are you okay? Why, yeah, Mom. I just accidentally knocked over some stuff. Midoriya said through the closed door as he didn't want his mom to see the small damage he did to the ceiling. Oh, okay, Izuku. Just making sure. Was it your collection of All Might figures? She said, which made Midoriya respond. No, definitely not. You do take absolute care in ensuring they aren't damaged. Well, they'll go make lunch. I'll be done in an hour, okay? Okay, Midoriya responded as he heard his mother's footsteps fade into the background. At that, Midoriya got on the chair and would grab into the kunai firmly as he began to pull at it. We apologize for that, Midoriya. We didn't mean to startle you, Liang said as Midoriya was trying to pry the kunai from the ceiling. It's okay. It's just you two haven't said anything for the past 2 days, and I didn't know when you both would come back, Midoriya said as he pulls, which managed to get some fragments from the ceiling to come off, to which Hanzo would respond. We needed time to talk to you, Midoriya, and I should start with saying that I apologize for my outburst that day, Hanzo said, to which Midoriya stopped pulling on the kunai. Master Hanzo, you don't need to apologize. I did go against your orders, and I put myself and everyone in danger. I had to save her. She was in danger, and no one went to help her. I can't let someone get hurt and not do anything when I could have done something, Midoriya said as he remembered his years of abuse and there not being anyone for him, even when others could have helped him. That is why I needed time to think before we talked. I think it's time we talked about both Hellfire and Cryomancy that we chose to wait on until you got stronger, Hanzo said as Midoriya listened closely at his master's words before going back to pulling on the kunai. What else is there to Hellfire and Cryomancy? He said as he continued pulling with more chunks of the ceiling falling. We already told you about what would happen if you dwell too far into Hellfire, that you'll be consumed by its power and manipulation. However, there's more to it, Hanzo said. When reaching that level of pain, Hellfire transforms your body in a way to where it takes the full capacity of Hellfire, along with the increased power. There are 3 stages to those forms, and it's the same with Cryomancy. Hanzo said, which Midoriya rose an eye at. Wait, cryomancy also has the same consequences? Midoriya asked as he pulled once more on the kunai, which managed to finally come off, but he now had a pile of ceiling rubble to clean up and a hole in his ceiling. Yes, like I told you that cryomancy requires you to have concentration, otherwise you won't be able to conjure up or correctly use your quirks. Remember when you tried using Hellport or Shoulder Bash? Liang asked as Midoriya could remember how overusing his powers made it difficult for him to use them properly, to which Midoriya would respond with a yes. Yeah, I remember, but I thought cryomancy didn't require emotional input. Midoriya said as he could swear that his masters told him that both had different requirements to be used. Good that you remember. True, we did say both required different methods to be used. We didn't say it was the only way for your quirks to be stronger. Liang said as Midoriya listened closely. Hanzo has told you what happened if you dwell too far into hellfire and you take in a stronger form in doing so. However, that isn't the only enhancement you have. Same with cryomancy. Normally, when you can use both quirks, you enter the first stage of hellfire and cryomancy, which allows you normal usage to both powers along with its benefits of healing and endurance. The second stage is aura, the one where you were beginning to access but was more incomplete, a sign form. During this, your attacks are much stronger and become covered in either hell flames or ice shards depending on which quirk you are using at the time. This can also be the transition stage between the first and last stage. The final stage, and the one where it pushes your body to its limit and transforms it to accommodate the added strength, is Cryomancer Inspector, or as you may also know as Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Liang finished saying as Midoriya could only think at his master's words at their explanation. So there's more power that he didn't know of. Not only that, but that both are linked to his emotional response meant that if he wasn't careful, he could be pushed into those forms. As Midoriya continued with this thought, Hanzo would continue with the explanation. Do note that with each transformation you take form, you could become more unstable and be harder to reason with if you let the power overwhelm you. Hanzo said as Midoriya would now come to understand more of Master Hanzo's outburst, as there was now more risk to each strengthening of power. Did he regret saving the girl? No, not by a long shot. But he will have to learn to control these powers to make sure he doesn't hurt anyone by accident. At this thought, Hanzo would continue talking. Look, Midoriya, we didn't want you to access these levels of powers until you gain more experience, and that is still the original plan. However, we will need to focus on more mental fortification so that if something like the exam happened again, you have a way to resist its influence. Understood? To which Midoriya responded. Yes, Master Hanzo. To which Liang would respond. Good. Now I believe you have a mess that needs your attention. To which Midoriya looked at the amount of damage caused by the kunai along with the hole in the ceiling. I think I can fix that hole with a poster, Midoriya said as more of the ceiling fell onto the ground. A lot of posters, Midoriya thought. Several days later. Since then, Midoriya has primarily been focusing on meditation to help with mental fortitude, as the exam helped him see more flaws that needed to be done, which were reflected in Hanzo's and Liang's training of the Green Net. He learned that in his battle against the Zero-Pointer, he accessed two more abilities for both Hellfire and Cryomancy, being called Ice Barrier, and a new weapon which was a kunai with a chain connecting it, similar to the one from when he first met his masters, with Hanzo telling him it is simple, called Spear. The Ice Barrier is an ability that works similarly to a shield and can defend him from massive attacks like the Zero-Pointer, and it can work as a countermeasure as ITLL freeze anyone who makes contact with it. Thought long-range attacks won't have the same effect. He would start training on their usage, which was slow but making somewhat progress. Midoriya was still trying to properly summon the Ice Barrier, as it still wasn't the same size of perfect spherical shape, and with the kunai, he was struggling on making the blade land where he wants it to strike, and using the chain would result in him accidentally swinging it onto himself. It would pass a week and the results of the entrance exam would constantly be in his mind, as he didn't know if he managed to gather all the necessary points. Izuku. Izuku. Midoriya heard his mother call home, which brought him out of his thoughts. Should I be worried about you? You've been staring at that fish for the past few minutes, his mom said as Midoriya realized he zoned out. Oh, no, it's okay, Midoriya said as he went on to eat. A few hours later. Midoriya was sitting on the couch as he was summoning some ice from his hand as he attempted to make a small ice sculpture on the coffee table since he wanted to manage his ice at a small scale. So far it was going somewhat well. He could control the amount of ice along with the density and toughness, however he had more trouble with precision as it looks more like a blocky figure than what he was trying to get. "What are you trying to form, Midoriya?" Liang asked. "I tried to do All Might in sculpture form, but..." Midoriya said as he looked at the small ice sculpture that looked like one of those drawings he would make as a kid. "You have the formation down. However, I would suggest using the tips of your fingers and focus on the intensity there to get more precision," Liang said, which Midoriya looked confused at the suggestion. "How do you know how to make an ice sculpture?" To which Hanzo would respond. Liang had a hidden talent for making ice sculptures back in our time. Could make any ice look like what he wanted. To which Midoriya looked with a deadpan look. Are you serious?" To which Liang responded with a sigh. "Yes, Midoriya, we all have a hobby. We don't just train and fight every day." However, once Cage found out about it, he would always ask me to do some trivial task for him. Like that time he asked you to be a human air conditioner during one of our meetings when the thermostat broke. "Yeah, like that one." The two grandmasters would talk as Midoriya could only listen at the two as he suddenly heard his mom calling for him. "Izuku, Izuku." It came. He saw her walk to him as she handed him a letter that had the letters U.A in them. "Izuku's room. So this is it. The results of my hard work and training," Midoriya thought as he sat in his chair looking at the letter in his hand, hesitating to open it as he began to doubt himself on if he passed or not. "No point in avoiding the inevitable, Midoriya," Liang said, to which Hanzo would add on. "Whether you pass or not, do note that you did us proud, Izuku," Hanzo said, which encouraged the greenette to finally tear out the letter and see inside was a disc of some kind. Then before he could think further, it began to show light into the wall by his desk. "I am here as a projection. All Might," Midoriya said in confusion as he looked at the image of All Might, who was in a pink background wearing a yellow striped suit and has a blue tie around his neck. Now you may be wondering why I'm giving the announced. Well, you are currently seeing the newest staff member of U.A. All Might announced as Midoriya's eyes expanded at the announcement. "All Might is going to be my teacher," Midoriya said out loud at the thought of his hero teaching him, but was brought out by the symbol of peace talking to someone to the side. What is it? Wrap it up? But there is something I must talk to him about. It's going to push everything else back? All right. Okay." Midoriya heard as he put tentative attention to what he was going to say next. "Izuku Midoriya, you managed to score 34 villain points along with having a perfect score in the written portion, which would have gotten you into the hero course," All Might said, which got a huge weight lifted from Midoriya's chest as he accomplished the first step towards his dream. He was about to just end the message there until he heard All Might continue. But there was a secret component added to the test, which caught his attention at what he was talking about. "I'm an entertainer as well. First, take a look at this video." All Might clicked a button on a remote, and it showed a video. "Excuse me, Midoriya saw the same brown-haired girl from earlier as she seemed to be fidgeting in place. "It's the nice girl, but what is she doing there?" Midoriya thought as he continued watching as he saw the video pause once more. "She came to negotiate directly in person after the exam." "Negotiate what?" "Keep watching to find out," All Might said as he continued with the rest of the video. The person with green curly hair and freckles, is it possible for me to give him some of my points?" There was still time left, and he could have gotten more points if he wanted to. But instead, he came and saved me from the 0-pointer. So I thought maybe he needed more points. Midoriya heard, which made him feel guilty, thinking that she may not have passed due to him in giving some of her points to him. He saved me. At least give him some of the points he lost because of me. "No, please don't. I don't want someone to lose their dream because of me," Midoriya said quietly as the guilt for what he was seeing the nice brown-haired girl who was willing to transfer her points to him at the risk of her failing. He could only continue watching. However, the entrance exam was not graded only on villain points. Midoriya heard All Might announce as the video continued. "Even if you ask, you cannot give him your points. There's no reason to give him any." Female listener present Mike said, which Midoriya began to listen more closely to what was happening. How can a hero course reject people who save others and do the right thing? Call that lip service? Bring it on. This is a job that requires risking one's life to put that lip service into practice. Rescue points. And they're given by a panel of judges. It's the other basic ability we at UA look at. All Might said as he then projected a scoreboard showing all the results, at which point Midoriya would see where he scored along with 2 columns next to his name saying villain and rescue points. Izuku Midoriya, 70 rescue points. Add on to the points earned, added together, you earned 104 points. Being in first overall, Midoriya's jaw would fall open as he heard how many points he was able to collect. It felt like it was a dream, that it was unreal, but here right now, All Might was telling him that he passed. Midoriya couldn't hold his emotions as he could feel his chest swell at him having overachieved, going against what everyone has been telling him for years and showing that he was making his dream a reality. Midoriya would hear the sound of his masters as he focuses on what they were saying. Never underestimate your strength, Midoriya, Liang said. All your hard work is finally paying off, Izuku. Hanzo said as Midoriya saw All Might open his hand towards the camera. Chapter 4, Nightmares. Izuku would step out of his room and would see that his mother was waiting for him outside of his room. His mom had the look of anticipation, yet worry at the results of her son's one chance to achieve his dream. That worry would be washed away as soon as she saw her only son smile with glee, which in turn made her slowly smile as tears began to slowly escape from her eyes. She would give her son a hug in which the green-haired young man would return as well as he would hold that hug for a bit. Everything that followed went by in a breeze as it was followed with his mother telling him how proud she was of him. Then calling his father, who would also be in the same state of emotion as his mother, and by the time nighttime finally came, Midoriya released a breath of exhaustion as he laid down on his bed with his arms behind his head. I made it. I really made it, Midoriya said to himself as it finally was sinking in. You did, Izuku. The efforts of your training have shown. Felt pride in how far you have come, Hanzo said as Liang would follow. Indeed, you listened, implemented, and learned everything that we have taught you and have begun to use your quirks as your own. You have come a long way since we began your training, Midoriya, Liang said as Midoriya would respond to them. So much has happened since I first met you, Grandmasters. 10 months ago, I did not know about the existence of the Shirai Ryu or Lin Kei, that my ancestors were defenders of the realm along with other great fighters, or that there would have been a chance for me to be a hero, Midoriya said as he sat up and put both arms in front of him as in his right hand, he ignited a small flame and in his left hand, a small blue glow began to materialize a bit of ice. You two have shown me so much that I do not know where to begin. I just want to say thank you, Midoriya said as he clenched both palms and the glow of the ice and flame were shut out. It is no issue, Midoriya. The clan is your family through and through, no matter the distance, Liang said as Midoriya released a yawn as he would lay down on the bed as he turned off the lights in the room and began to let sleep take over him, but not before releasing one last word. Family. Dreamscape. It was dark. The whole view that Midoriya could see as he was sleeping was the same when he first met Hanzo and Liang, empty void of darkness. What am I here again for? Midoriya said as he began to feel some surface underneath him as he began to gain his footing on the void. He would look in every direction but continued to see pure darkness, and as he did, he remembers why he was there the first time and naturally reacted the way someone would when they returned to the same place they went when they nearly died. No, 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 did I die again? Master Hanzo? Grandmaster? Are any of you two there? Midoriya yelled as he would look around the void, and as he did not get any responses, he would halt his looking around as he decided that he should walk in one direction until he either encounters something or wakes up from his dream. Having a plan set in motion, Midoriya would begin his moving, hoping to encounter anyone or anything in his way. He did not know how much time has passed as he continued walking. He would continuously call out for both Hanzo and Liang every once in a while, but no matter how much he called, he never got a response. As he continued walking, he began to see some sort of glows in the distance. Not having many other options in the endless void, he chose to go and investigate the lights. As he approached the glowing lights, the environment around him began to change. Gone is the dark and endless void, and was not instead replaced with a white snowy forest with snowfall being what decorated the sky. He could feel his feet sink on the snowy terrain. "What is this place?" Midoriya said as he was continuously getting more questions than answers as he spent more time in this world. As Midoriya continued walking, he began to hear the sound of someone else walking, during which Midoriya would alert himself and followed the sound of the walking and soon saw a man wearing a black gi with a cowl that covered their head, leaving a view of their eyes. They had yellow clothes that were over it, a black mask, a black sash that was tied around their waist, along with black gauntlets. Midoriya would observe the man as he would begin to call the man out. "Hey, excuse me, who are you?" Midoriya would ask, but would not get a response as they continued walking. Midoriya would continue until the man stopped in place. As Midoriya believed he finally got the man's attention, the green net began to approach him. Sir, who are you and what is this place?" Midoriya said as he looked at what the man in yellow was watching and saw countless corpses frozen in the ground, either in broken pieces with chunks of human meat littering the ground or bodies missing limbs and blood tainting the snowy ground. At the center of it was a throne that was frozen in place along with a body that was a snowy white color. "What the hell happened?" Midoriya said as he could only look at the massacre of people that were on the ground as he fell to the ground and could feel the content of his stomach feel squeezy at the scene he was watching. Midoriya did not know what to make of the scene until he heard the footsteps of someone and soon found another man who had white sashes around their waist and wrist along with a dark blue gi and cowl and blue mask along with fur along the shoulder and legs. He observed as the man in yellow would turn back, but the man in blue would throw a right hook into the yellow man's face, stunning him before throwing him onto the frozen man sitting on the chain, shattering the body and spreading chunks of human meat and coloring the ground with blood. Midoriya ran towards the man in blue to intervene, but would just phase through the man, resulting in him falling onto the snow once more as it clung onto his body as he stood up. As he looks behind him at the two gi-clad men, he saw the man in blue step onto the severed head as it was crushed underneath their foot as Midoriya would begin to hear the man in yellow talk. "Baihan." Hanzo Midoriya heard both men address each other, which resulted in the green-haired young man's eyes expanded at the mention of the name. One of his grandmasters and his other ancestor were fighting each other, which confused Midoriya since he was wondering why they were fighting as he heard Master Hanzo continued talking with Baihan. "You dare kill the Shogun?" Midoriya heard as he looked at the now broken body as it made him question why Baihan, someone that he heard Grandmaster talk about, killed someone that was of high importance. He knew they were assassins, but from the sound of Master Hanzo's tone, it looked like assassins had targets they should not go after. A necessary step he heard from Baihan as Midoriya looked at the Shirai Ryu Grandmaster and saw the look of shock and horror, but for whatever reason Midoriya could not hear him as Baihan would continue with his talk. "Is without means to defend itself," as there would be a pause of silence between the two men. Midoriya could only look in shock at what Baihan said, and before he could see the confrontation between his two ancestors, Midoriya would feel his body suddenly constrict as he began to see a blue glow surround him and start being lifted off the ground. "What the? Ah!" Midoriya yelled as he suddenly was flung at great speed away from the scene as he felt himself crash through several trees and branches, rolling on the snowy ground before finally coming to a stop as his back hit a boulder. "Ack!" Midoriya yelled as despite the place feeling like a dreamlike area, the pain somehow felt very real to him. What just happened? Midoriya thought as he was reeling in from the pain, but would not have much to remain sitting as he caught sight of a wave of flames approaching him at a rapid pace. Not having much time, he would dodge roll out of the way, barely missing the flames as the boulder would be engulfed in flames. Midoriya would try to stand up as he tried looking around for who was attacking him. That is when he spotted various colored glow among the white snowy environment. From what he could see, each glow had a silhouette that masks many of their details, but gave Midoriya enough to see some sort of person was inside of each glow, which was about 9 different that he could see, with 2 glows being green, with one being brighter than the other, with the second one being a darker green. The next being a yellow and blue glow. 2 purple glows with one being a brighter purple, while the other looked smaller and was a darker purple. He would also see a blue glow that had long hair that looked to be tied in a ponytail, another silhouette that was a dark red. The next one was a dark gray glow that had long hair, and the last one he could see had an orange glow around them. Midoriya did not know what he was seeing, as the glows made it hard to figure out who they were, as Midoriya could only continue staring at the various glowing silhouettes, as Midoriya tried to use Hellfire or Cryomancy, but no matter how much he tried, he could not feel the energy of his quirk. Why isn't it working? Midoriya thought as he looked at the glowing silhouettes, and something told him that these individuals were not here to talk. Midoriya could only stare at the group before he felt a wet appendage suddenly wrap around his neck as he instinctively went to grab it, as he felt himself being dragged backward. He would see the appendage having slippery weird texture, and it was a pinkish color, and would try to pull himself free from the odd appendage, but it only felt like it was being tightened around his throat before feeling his back hitting a tree as the appendage seemed to be coming from above him. He would look up and would see nothing at first until he notices some seam lines that took the shape of a person. Midoriya would continue struggling as he saw a pale green glow approaching from the side, as he began to hear the sound of sizzling coming from both their hands as it began to take on a very bright neon color, which Midoriya could figure out what it was planning to use it on. Midoriya, not wanting to know if he could die in his dream, thought quickly and barely holding onto the slippery appendage and biting down onto it, which seemed to work as it managed to give the green-haired young man a chance to slip thought, with the pale green glow's acid barely missing him. Though that relief was short-lived, as Midoriya would see the red glow swinging some red liquid at him, as the green net barely was dodging the attacks, as he could feel it making slashes on his clothes. The red glow would be followed by the dark green glow as Midoriya would see a form of claws coming from them, as Midoriya was barely keeping up with both attacks, as he was quickly becoming overwhelmed, and in a moment of adrenaline would roll in between both attackers as Midoriya made a break for it. However, he would not make it too far, as he would see a puff of smoke, and out of it came the gray glow as it would throw a punch right into Midoriya's gut, which made the green net double over in pain before the glow left once more in smoke. And then Midoriya would feel a knee strike into his lower back, which made him double back in pain as he would be thrown forward from the strike, making him crash into the cold ground. Midoriya would try to pull himself up, using a branch to support his weight. A quick blur of purple would come into view as it would sucker punch Midoriya in the face, as Midoriya would feel himself spinning out of control as the world was spinning and being filled with the various glows in his views. Midoriya's spinning would come to a halt as Midoriya would fall to the ground with his back on the ground. Midoriya would be still somewhat dazed as he would look up, but would see the blue glow approaching him with what looked like red fans that had a shine through it, as the blue glow began to swing them towards Midoriya as he would try crawling back, as the fans would barely be missing him. After some few moments of crawling, the blue glow would grow impatient as it closed both fans and lunged themselves towards Midoriya, who rolled to the side and standing up and trying to run. Like before, it would not be a long run, as Midoriya's movement would be halted as he felt a sudden scream that would push him to the side as he would crash through a tree. The green net would barely have the strength to push himself up as he saw the dark purple glow approach Midoriya. The green-haired young man would look up at the purple glow, and for the first time since he looked at the glows, he seemed to catch another detail to this glow as he would see some long appendages attachments around the side of their head before the purple glow would take the form of a face with long hair as it began to screech strongly at Midoriya as the green net would try to cover his ears, but the sound would prove to be too strong as it would push the green-haired young man back on the ground, as he could feel his skin begin to push itself from his body the longer they screamed. Hey! Midoriya yelled before the dark purple glow stopped screeching as Midoriya would lay down motionless on the ground as he did not feel the strength enough to bother moving. The green net remained laying on the cold snow as he began to cough out some blood as his ears began to drip some blood as well. Midoriya would not have much time to lay down as the same blue glow would engulf him as it lifts him back from the ground, as it put Midoriya in a standing up position as the green net would look up at the glows that were slowly approaching him, with all of them preparing to use whatever power they were showing. However, they would all stop in place as the one with a bright green glow would stand in front of Midoriya, as the green net would see that the silhouette would lift a fist being reeled back as a green glow would engulf it as it threw it right at Midoriya's face, and then Back in Midoriya's room, Midoriya would lunge himself out of his bed as he would feel a cold sweat run down his back as he ran a hand down his face. The greenette would be breathing somewhat heavily as he would pull himself out of bed as he sat at the edge of the bed, whereupon Hanzo and Leon would notice their student state. "Izuku, are you okay?" "Midoriya, what happened?" Both grandmasters questioned as Midoriya was finally able to calm down as he addressed both masters. I don't know. I had this weird dream," Midoriya said as Hanzo would push further on this fact. "What do you mean by that, Izuku?" Hanzo said, as Leon would add on to that. "Do you want to talk to us about it?" To which Midoriya gave it some thought as to whether reveal the information, as it could just be a random dream one would get every once in a while. However, after learning about his bloodline and the oddities that have happened since then, the greenette was not sure anymore and decided that it would be better if they listened to at least what is gnawing at him. "I was in that weird place where we first met, and after calling for you two and not getting a response, I went to look for anything, and after some time, I found a snowy forest, and for some reason, Master Hanzo and your brother Grandmaster Baihan were fighting after Baihan killed the shogun," Midoriya said, which he would not get any response for a few moments as Leon would respond. "It is rather interesting, that dream, Midoriya," Leon said as Midoriya responded. "I know it is weird, and I did not know what was going on." Master Hanzo's words seem to be fuzzy, and it feels somewhat incomplete, that dream, Midoriya said as Hanzo would continue. "That would be the case," Hanzo said hesitantly, which Midoriya did not know why that was the case, and before he could push further with that question, he remembered an aspect of the dream that he should bring up. "Also, I met these weird glowing people in the dream that all were kicking my ass," Midoriya said. That seems interesting, Midoriya. What else did you see in that dream from that?" Leon asked with curiosity. "Well, there were about 11 different glowing individuals, though 2 of them were different in that glow. It was rather faint, and one didn't seem to have the glow, rather just looked like they were transparent. Also, they all had distinct powers, such as one using acid, smoke, and a green glow that woke me up. I know it may be a dream, but for some reason, it felt all too real," Midoriya said as Hanzo would take a few moments before he responded back. "This is rather interesting, Izuku. Our best guess is that those glows must be a sort of sign to the warriors you need to recruit," which Midoriya would respond back. "You mean the other descendants?" Midoriya asked as Leon would respond. "Right. It could be that those glow that you were seeing may some sort of hint at the descendants that you will be meeting. Did you catch anything that may distinguish them?" To which Midoriya would shake his head and respond back. "No. They all appeared as silhouettes with the glow surrounding them," Midoriya said as he could hear a sigh from both masters before Hanzo responded. "Well, at least so far you made some progress in recruiting Earthrealm's forces. For now, it is better to keep an eye out for any more of these dreams, Izuku. It may lead us into a possible lead into who you will need to recruit," which Leon would follow on. "We know it may completely fully satisfy your curiosity, but it is the best possible answer we can come up, Midoriya." To which Midoriya could only sigh as he ran his hand once more through his hair. The greenette did not know what to think of the dream. First, he happened to be back on that void. He first met his grandmasters. Then he saw what was Master Hanzo and Baihan fighting, and then was confronted by various glowing individuals that nearly killed him. He just did not know what to think about that dream. Hallucination? He did not know what to call it, but before he could question it any further, he would hear his mother calling for him. "Izuku, breakfast is ready." To which he realized it was morning. He would hear his mother call once more. "Izuku, are you okay?" Midoriya heard as he would respond to it quickly. "Yai's mom, he'll be there soon," Midoriya said through the door. "Okay." Midoriya would just run his hands through his head once more and taking a deep breath before finally standing up from his bed, with the explanation of his masters being still in his mind as he opens the door to the room and starts his day off. Chapter 5. Test Your Might. Some months have passed since Midoriya's acceptance into the hero course. The spring season has finally come, signaling the start of the new school year and the beginning of Midoriya's new chapter in his life. The green-haired young man has turned 18 years old and was on his way to his first day of classes, but not before his mom did what any worried parent did before they left for their first day of classes. "Did you pack your pens, Izuku?" making sure that their child had everything packed. Yes, Mom, I made sure to not forget them, Izuku said as he walked to the doorway, putting on his red sneakers. Did you pack napkins as well? His mom said as Midoriya bent down to grab his yellow backpack. Yes, Mom, Izuku said as while he knew his mother's concern, he was getting a tad annoyed at her constant questioning if he had everything packed and ready as he extended his hand to reach the door handle, adjusting his backpack at the same time. And Izuku, she said as Midoriya stopped and turned to face his mom. Yes, Mom, Izuku said as he saw her eyes sparkle at him. I'm so proud of you. You never gave up on your dream even after everyone did, including me, she said as she wiped her eyes with her sleeves. Midoriya looked at her with a look of understanding and sympathy. Now look at you now, all grown up into a handsome man, accepted into your dream school. Your father may not be here right now to see you off, but I know he is very proud of you, Izuku, she said as Midoriya could only give her a tight hug, which was reciprocated back. After a few seconds, Midoriya would kiss her on her head after separating and giving her a big smile. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot, Midoriya said as his mom released a few tears of joy at seeing her little boy growing into a man as she saw him opening the door as he began to take a step forward out, but not before stopping and turning back to his mom. And Mom, I promise I'll make both you, Dad, and our clans proud, Midoriya said as he began to walk away as Inko could only see her son make his way out of the complex as she closed the door. You already have Izuku on board the train to U.A. Midoriya was standing the relatively empty train that morning as there were only a few well-dressed individuals and students from different schools on board. As he waited for the train to arrive at his destination, the green-haired young man would be browsing the newsletters on Hero Activity, and just like the metro itself, nothing worthwhile was happening. Small crimes such as a purse snatching were what made the bulk of that morning's news. Slow morning today, Midoriya thought as he kept scrolling. He eventually ran out of news articles, even after refreshing the page several times. He would look at the time to see how much time before reaching his station and saw he had several more minutes left, where he had a small curiosity crept its way into his head. I wonder, Midoriya thought as he decided to go to the search engine and look up both Shirai Ryu and the Lin K to see if there was anything the world knew about the clans. To his surprise or not, he found the information there to be very lacking or non-existent, as most of the links that directed him were on conspiracy sites talking about how both clans were involved with the U.S. military wing called Special Forces, which Midoriya knew was true because of Hanzo and Liang, but to the world, it appears as if these two clans were just that, a conspiracy. The clans managed to keep themselves well hidden, it seems, Midoriya said as Liang would respond to his statement. We had to remain quiet in our clan activities, Midoriya. A clan of assassins can't operate if the world knows of their existence, Liang said as this brought up a good question. Well, it seems you two were able to make sure both clans were not exposed or found out, but didn't you two have times where the clan's existence was almost found out? Midoriya asked as while possible that both clans were able to maintain their secrecy by not drawing attention to themselves. Eventually, someone is bound to find out, to which Hanzo would answer. We made sure that no one aside from those we trust would know of us. Members would erase any track of their activities to ensure nothing would trace back to us. If members were caught, anything like the emblem and uniform of both clans was destroyed so that the world wouldn't be able to find connections, along with the clan members being able to lie their way into assuring that the clan's secrecy was of most importance when captured. Eventually, the world began to populate with those who had powers, and as regulations began to take place, it made it almost impossible for our members to conduct their missions without having the government going after our members. Eventually, both clans were forced to dissolve because of the increased regulations unless we wanted to risk the exposure of both clans and their relation to past activities. Special forces were helpful in erasing any connection both of our clans and individuals had with them to ensure that nothing was exposed, Hanzo said, which seemed that there were many times the clans were found out, which brought out a sigh of relief to Midoriya since the world wouldn't know the activities that both clans did, since if the world found out that clans of assassins and ninjas were conducting missions on broad daylight, then most people would go after them no matter what. But wouldn't you want the clans to be remembered as more than just ninja assassins, and perhaps I don't know, heroes? Midoriya said, to which he heard a sign from both grandmasters. As much as we want our clans to come back, Midoriya, it is better than both clans dissolved in the end. The world has changed drastically since our time passed, and while we wish that the clans we have built and grown could continue once more, we know it is a different world to the one we were in. Liang said as Hanzo would add on. Our iteration may have finished Izuku, but that does not mean that our clans are completely gone. You and a few others carry the symbol of the Shirai Ryu and the Lin K. The world does not need our version of the Lin K and Shirai Ryu. However, we trust you in carrying that lineage and making it into something better. Hanzo said, which Midoriya held on to his words, as he was now what carried the lineage of his ancestors and to bring new meaning into their names. Looking down at his phone once more and looking at the scribbles of the clan's emblems he put as the backdrop of his phone, he tightens his grip on the handle he was holding from the train as he now had more reason to keep going forward. I won't let you down, Grandmasters, Midoriya said, which if he could see Hanzo and Liang, he would be seeing the prideful smile they had on their faces at their descendants' determination. And Midoriya, Liang said, which got Midoriya's attention. Yes, Grandmaster. The Lin K aren't ninjas, we are warriors. The Shirai Ryu are ninjas, do not forget. Liang said, which got Midoriya to raise an eye from sheer confusion before Hanzo let out a sigh. Do you have to do that every time, Liang? To which the Lin K Grandmaster would respond. Yes, Hanzo. I already had enough explaining it to both cages when we were alive. I do not want Midoriya to continue that mistake. Liang said, which just brought even more confusion from the situation, which didn't go unnoticed by the Shirai Ryu Grandmaster. During our time, Cage and his daughter would also refer to both our clans as ninjas, which was correct for the Shirai Ryu, but the Lin K were warriors that focus on more than just ninja work. However, that didn't matter to Cage, and soon everyone in the Special Forces started calling the Lin K just ninjas, where at which point anytime anyone said the Lin K were ninjas, Liang made a point to correct them. Hanzo finished saying, which brought a deadpanned look from Midoriya at the explanation. He was going to say seriously, but he knew he was going to be spending more time listening to his master's justification, so he chose to just let it slide, and before he knew it, he arrived at the station. As he got out, he would look back on his phone to notice that 2 articles caught his attention on the conspiracy site. He decided to check out later since the title of the 2 articles seemed quite bizarre in names, and stating that these events would change not only the clans but the world as well. They were called The Flow of the White Wells Extermination and the Cyber Initiative. A few minutes later, Udata front gates. Well, there it is, Ue Midoriya thought as he stood once more in front of the blue gates with the golden letters of Udata above it. He continued to be mesmerized by the presence of the school. Heroes such as Best Jeanist, Endeavor, and All Might himself are notable alumni that the school produced. Just over a year ago, the thought of him thinking about enrolling in you would have gotten him laughed at or being told that no quirkless individual could be a hero. Now, here he was, standing in front of the most prestigious university in Japan, wearing their school uniform, which consisted of a red tie, a gray blazer with some green stripes around the sleeves, and the front, dark green slacks, and his red sneakers, and had powers to call his own. All right, Midoriya, I think you spent enough time admiring the building, he heard Liang say as Midoriya was brought back to Earthrealm. Right. Sorry, it's just that. It all still feels like a dream being here, Midoriya said as Hanzo would add on to the comment. Well, this isn't a dream, Izuku. You wearing their uniform is proof enough that you had what it took to be accepted, and now this is your chance. To which Midoriya could only smile at the words of encouragement from his 2 masters. Thank you, Grandmasters, Midoriya said as he took a step forward, but not before making sure he didn't trip himself on the bump again as he sidestepped it. As he took several steps forward, the greenette began to slow down his movement before he came to a complete halt, which got both Grandmasters' attention as all 3 came to a sudden realization. Midoriya? Yes, Grandmaster. You do know where you were supposed to go, right? No, Midoriya said as he began to take his phone out to see how long he had before the first bell would ring, and he found out he had 5 minutes. Midoriya yelled as he realized how much he wasted as he began to have a small freak out as Hanzo and Liang tried in vain to calm their students down. Midoriya, calm down. You faced a literal building-size robot without worry, and now you are having a mental breakdown for being late. Liang said with confusion in how their descendants' attitude changes outside of combat. Rather than using that energy of yours to worry, use it in a more productive manner and calm yourself. Hanzo said, which seemed to have worked somewhat, as Midoriya was taking some breaths to calm himself out. Right, 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 you're right. Now, where do I start looking? Midoriya said as he began to jog his way towards the building looking for any sign that could indicate where the hero course was. If I'm going by observation, I think those doors over there should lead you to your class, Izuku. Hanzo said as he was looking frantically everywhere to where he was talking, and soon found 3 different doors that were red, and like the gate had golden letters above it that each had numbers 1, 2, or 3 on it on the door themselves. Well, that was easier than expected, Midoriya said as he made his way towards the door that had 1 on it, and made his way down the hall. He would pass various classrooms that seemed to be bursting with life, and damn near caught himself in an explosion from the support class workshop when the door seemed to blow from its hinges. 1A, 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 here it is, Midoriya said as he looked at the door that was many times his size, black, and saying 1A in red, which got a response from his masters. The school seems to accommodate for any students of varying powers, it seems, Hanzo said, which Midoriya responded. Did our clan have anyone that was that tall or big? Midoriya asked, which he got a response from Leon. No, but we knew of groups that were of great stature like the Shokin, Hanzo said, which satisfied their descendants as he approached the door. As he approached the door, he began to hear some loud sounds from within the classroom, was about to wish some last-minute prayers, but halted himself as he was about to grab the handle. I cursed myself by accident during the entrance exam. I am not repeating the same mistake this time, Midoriya thought as if he prayed for something to not happen. He knew it was bound to happen. So with a deep breath, he decided that whatever fate gave him, he would run with it. Don't put your feet on the table, Midoriya heard as he saw the tall, serious guy and Bakugo having a back-and-forth argument as Midoriya hung his head down. So even when I don't think or say it, it will still happen, Midoriya thought as he now knew who he would be dealing with for the next 4 years. As this was happening, both grandmasters would look at the scene happening in front and couldn't help but appreciate the discipline that the tall, serious man had. They'll give the boy credit. He is rather disciplined and takes this seriously, Hanzo said, as Liang would voice his thought as well. On that note, I can agree, Liang said, at which point the tall, serious guy would notice the green-haired young man's arrival. It's you, the tall, serious guy announced, which surprised Midoriya and caught the attention of those in the classroom. Midoriya saw as the navy-haired guy would make quick pace towards him in a very stiff and robotic fashion before halting a few steps in front of him and stretching an arm towards him. Good morning. I am from Semi-Private Academy. My name is Tenya Ida, said as Midoriya looked at his arm before grabbing it and shaking it as well. Morning, Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya said as he saw Ida give a bow to the green-haired young man, which brought him confusion. Midoriya, I must apologize as I have misjudged your character as someone who would be causing trouble, and as much as I hate to admit, you are superior to me, Ida said, which just got confusion not only from the greenette, but also from both Hanzo and Liang. Huh. Both Midoriya, Hanzo, and Liang said as they heard the navy-haired young man praise towards Midoriya. Oh, it's you, the curly-haired fire and ice guy. Midoriya heard behind him as he would turn around and come face to face with the same brown-haired girl from the entrance exam who was wearing the same a uniform with a dark green skirt and black leggings, which managed to brighten Midoriya's face up as he took a good look at her. Holy crap, she's cute, Midoriya thought as he looked at the girl, as both Hanzo and Liang could only facepalm at their descendant tripping over himself when talking once more to the female gender. You made it. You don't know how relieved I was knowing you passed. Then again, after seeing what you were to do with that ice shield and fireball, I wouldn't have been surprised if you passed even if you didn't help me, she said, which Midoriya could only continue blushing at the girl praising him. IIT was no problem. Tu just wanted to help, Midoriya said, stammering as all his confidence he had built in the past year seemed to have vanished into thin air as he talked to her, and Hanzo and Liang could continue to only sigh in defeat at seeing their student continue stammering. You were all hack and slash with the fire chain and ice, and you going all out and saying get over here, before splitting the zero-pointer in half. The girl said as she was replicating the way Midoriya used his spear attack, which brought some small embarrassment at how she described his actions during the exam, as he could only remain still with a bright blushing face and trying to cover his face from the blood running to his head. As this was happening, a heterochromia young man with red and white hair would glance up as he heard the brunette describe the green-haired young man's actions in being able to use not only fire, but also ice as well. However, as he looked at the greenette, he couldn't help but feel some familiarity with them, as if he met them at one point in time. He would end up shaking his head and draw it to just curiosity, but the fact that he could make fire and ice along with a chain, he didn't want to jump into conclusions and chose to just wait and see what happens as he would draw his attention back to the book he was reading with a simple thought ending his train of thought. This should be interesting. Bakugo was both surprised and in disbelief seeing the greenette not only somehow making it into Udare despite said green-haired young man being quirkless, but also destroying the zero-pointer. He knew the brown-haired round-faced girl was misremembering things as last time he remembered. Deku was quirkless, and while he wasn't crying or reacting to the insults he was getting a few months ago, Deku would not have been able to destroy one or even approach one of the shit-easy bots like one-pointers, much less destroy the building-sized zero-pointer. Deku had to have manipulated or done something to get in, and he knew that he would be kicked out once it was shown he was quirkless. She would stop her explanation of how Midoriya acted during his battle against the zero-pointer. She would give a small bow to the green-haired young man. "Oh, sorry. I guess I never introduced myself. Imochako Uraraka, and thank you again," Uraraka said with a bright smile which, if she could, would possibly blind Midoriya for how bright it was. Seeing that he hasn't introduced himself yet, Midoriya would also give a small bow in return and finally getting his face back to normal color. "No problem, Uraraka. My name is..." He stopped as he glanced behind her and would see what at best he could describe as a yellow caterpillar that was crawling its way to the front of the door. Ida, who was standing by watching the interaction, and Uraraka would notice the green-net's silence as they would follow his stare and see the same thing that he was looking at, during which it would turn in place, and it turned out to have a man inside of it that looked like they have not slept in various days and had scruffy long black hair. "If you are here to make friends, then I suggest you leave," the man in the yellow sleeping bag said in a monotone voice. "This is the hero course," the man said as he pulled out a juice box and drank it. "Are you for real?" all three said as they backed away from the door and into whatever chair they could find that was available as the man would step out of the sleeping bag. "It took you all 8 seconds to be quiet. You kids are irrational with the time we have," the man said as he carried the sleeping bag with him, and the class got a good view of the man. He was thin with black baggy clothes, unkempt hair, black boots, a utility belt, and a gray scarf around their neck. "My name is Shota Aizawa, and I'll be your professor." "HHHHHH" was the response the class gave to the man, as many were just looking in bewilderment, since the man didn't exactly look like any hero they've seen. Before anyone could question his authority, he would reach into his sleeping bag and pull out a set of clothes. "It's kind of sudden, but put this on and go out onto the field," Aizawa said as he tossed the attire to Midoriya, who caught it and would get a good look at the outfit. It was dark blue and 2 pieces with white lines going through it, which would form the letter U on top and A on the pant legs, before leaving the class to meet up outside. A few minutes later, a quirk assessment test. The whole class of 1A yelled out at the announcement of their homeroom teacher. "But what about the entrance ceremony and orientation?" Uraraka asked as Aizawa would respond to her question with the same monotone voice. "All of you are going to become heroes. You do not have time to spend on such luxuries. Udade allows us, teachers, to not stick to normal school traditions. That is how we run our classes," Aizawa said as Midoriya began to hear Leon comment on this. "The man is right, Midoriya. Like with you, we had to train you as soon as possible for the hardships that you would face, and while it was not as strenuous as to the way we trained those before you, we wanted you to be ready for the dangers that lurk ahead," Liang said as Midoriya could understand where he was coming at since he got an abbreviated version of it along with some experience with the assault and almost getting crushed by the zero-pointer. As he thought of this, Aizawa would continue with his explanation. You kids have been doing these physical tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks, right? The country still uses averages from students. These are not rational enough. So the Ministry of Education is procrastinating. Aizawa said in the same boring monotone voice as he would turn to the greenette, who would straighten out as he was under his gaze. Midoriya, relax. Don't be intimidated by the man. He heard Liang say. He is right, Izuku. Just listen and don't show weakness. Remember the confidence that you've trained to build for the past year, okay? Hanzo said as Midoriya would take a deep breath to calm himself from sweating bullets. Midoriya, would you care to step forward? Aizawa said as Midoriya would begin to take a few steps forward towards his professor as he came to a halt in front of the sleep-deprived man. You managed to score first in the entrance exam with 104 points. Even managed to destroy the zero-pointer in the process. Aizawa said, which at that moment Midoriya could feel the stare and gaze from his classmates along with a few whispers coming from them. Wait, what did Mr. Aizawa say? He took down the zero-pointer. Seriously? That thing nearly crushed us. Bro, for real? That thing was like a building. These were among some of the whispers Midoriya heard as he tried his best to maintain calmness as he was repeating his master's words internally to calm himself. Nothing to be embarrassed about. Nothing to be embarrassed about. Midoriya thought as Aizawa would look at the group of students which seemed to silence their murmurs within them. Bakugo would cross his arms as he stared at Deku and listened to what Aizawa just told them. He still didn't buy it that Deku was able to score higher than him along with taking down the damn zero-pointer. All of these claims and supposed achievements that Deku was able to achieve during the entrance exam seemed like a massive pile of bullshit if Deku was able to destroy the zero-pointer and score that high. Bakugo said, which didn't go unheard of by Uraraka. But he did. He created ice that froze the zero-pointer's arm, then threw fireballs at the arms, and a massive chain came out of his hand that he used to swing and split it in half. Uraraka said as Bakugo would just stop listening about halfway through as he still didn't believe all of that to be possible. Deku is quirkless, and there was nothing that could change his mind on that. A few people next to them, a bicolor-haired young man would hear the same claim once more, making ice and fire come out of them. He wasn't going to make claims yet, but whatever the green-haired young man that is called Midoriya had as a quirk seemed to bring his interest to the forefront. Now do you know what was your distance without your quirks? Aizawa said as he pulled out a ball from his pocket. About 43 meters. Midoriya said as Aizawa would toss the ball to Midoriya, who would catch it. Now, I want you to step up towards this plate, use your quirks, and do not hold back. Aizawa said as he stepped away from the white plate that was on the dirt ground as Midoriya began to take his place. Right, Mr. Aizawa, Midoriya said as he tossed the ball in the air before catching it once more. As Midoriya began to take center stage, he decided to just throw the ball with amplification with all his strength to get a good score. He would reel his right arm back, during which it began to be engulfed in flames and embers, and just as he prepared to launch the ball, he heard a loud yell. Deku! Midoriya heard as the yell was followed by a series of small explosions that caught his attention and halted his movement as he turned to look at the source of the sound and realized it to be a very much pissed-off Bakugo, who looked like he wanted to tear Midoriya's head right out of his neck. He began to approach the green-haired young man as Midoriya, who would begin to subside the flames in his arm, would look with a frown making its way towards his face as he began to take his Shotokan stance to defend against Bakugo. You better explain where and how you got yourself a quirk, you worthless piece of sh*argg*. Bakugo stopped in his tracks as Midoriya would be surprised, as well as he let down his stance, and both the explosive young man and the greenette were confused as to what was going on until Midoriya saw Bakugo was held in place by a long gray cloth that was holding Bakugo in place. He also took notice that the explosions themselves also stopped. What the hell? What is this shit? Bakugo yelled as he struggled on the cloth itself. This cloth is made from steel wire alloy woven with carbon nanofibers. Struggle as you might, but you will not be released. Midoriya and Bakugo heard as they both turned to their professor. I also deactivated your quirk, so don't think you can blast yourself out of it. Aizawa said as Midoriya would look at his professor, and he saw his eyes shine red and his hair standing up along with his scarf, and within the scarf, he would see a pair of yellow goggles with black tinting. Wait, goggles, captured weapon, a quirk that deactivates other quirks, and not many of us know who he is. You must be the Erasure hero, Eraser Head, Midoriya said out loud, which seemed to have gotten the attention of everyone there at the identity of their professor, which once more got murmurs from the class. Eraser Head? I haven't heard of him. I think he is one of those underground heroes. Really? He's an underground hero? Midoriya heard, as now he knew who they were dealing with now, as while there wasn't much information about Eraser Head due to him preferring to work away from the cameras as he deemed that it would interfere with his hero work, Midoriya knew that the man was capable enough to be put in charge of the class. As the murmurs of the class subsided, Aizawa would lessen the grip of his scarf on Bakugo. Now, he'll release you and your quirk is back, but do something like that again, Bakugo, and he'll have you expelled immediately. Do you understand? Aizawa said, which didn't seem to get a response from the explosive ashy blonde. I said, do you understand, Katsuki Bakugo? Aizawa said more loudly, which seemed to make a few in the class flinch in the rise of voice, which Bakugo didn't seem to be intimidated by, but would give a response to the teacher. Tisk whatever, Bakugo said as he made his way back to the other class members, but not before shooting a glare back at Midoriya, who didn't seem fazed by the glare that was shot in his way. Now with that small intervention having passed over, Aizawa would get some eye drops he pulled from his utility belt. I don't want you all to make me overuse my quirk. They'll get dry eyes, so be reasonable. And Midoriya? Aizawa said, which got Midoriya's attention as he looked at his teacher, who had a serious look on their face. I thought I told you to go all out, didn't I? To which Midoriya was confused for a moment. I am going to amplify my strength to lawn. That is not what I meant, Midoriya. I've seen what you could do during the exam. The greenette was stopped in mid-sentence as Aizawa looked at the green-haired young man. They'll tell this once more, and I want you to listen carefully. I won't repeat myself. Understood? Aizawa said. Yes, Mr. Aizawa. Midoriya said as Aizawa looked at Midoriya dead in the eye, which was taking everything in Midoriya's power to not break down in front of the sleep-deprived man. I want you to go all out in using your quirks. Not 5%, not 20%. I want to know what you can do with your quirk. Aizawa said, which Midoriya gave a response back. And if I don't? Midoriya asked, not out to spite his professor, but to know of the consequences which he wishes he didn't open his mouth upon, as his professor gave him a creepy smile that made Midoriya shiver to his spine. Then you would prove of no use here at the institution, that you do not have the potential to be a hero and be expelled. Does that answer your question? Aizawa said, which made Midoriya freeze both metaphorically and somewhat literally as a bit of ice was forming underneath his foot, as his classmates could also feel that their professor was not joking around with his claims. Yais, Mr. Aizawa, Midoriya said as he would tightly hold the ball with a shaking hand as he now began to think of a better way to throw the ball. Good, now go ahead. Remain within the circle, and go all out. We do not have all day to do this, so do hurry. Aizawa said as Midoriya began to brainstorm in any possible way to launch the ball the further he could. He could use flame port, but he needed to remain within the circle. He could make a slide of ice, but he needed his energy as well in case for the next few trials, and he didn't know if he could make ice that far without stepping out of the circle. He could conjure up one of his weapons, but he would either accidentally slice or crush the ball, so that was out of the question. He could use ice ball or fireball, as it could help him to make the ball travel far, but he doesn't know how far it would travel, and had the fear that it would either shatter or burn up in the travel. Midoriya, may I and Hanzo suggest to you? Liang said, which got Midoriya to halt his brainstorming. I'm listening, Midoriya said as he was running low on ideas. There is one ability that could help get you the furthest possible score on this, and ITLL, help with you conserving your energy. Hanzo said as Midoriya began to wonder which one as he went through just about all of the abilities he had except. No. ITLL just make it worse. Midoriya said in an exaggerative manner to his masters, but to the class that was spectating his movements, it looks like he was losing it. Look, we know you do not like to work with the Hellspawn, and it doesn't like to work with you either, but it's the one where you are guaranteed to get a good distance if it cooperates. Hanzo said as Midoriya responded. And if it doesn't? What then? Midoriya asked Hanzo as he could hear his master begin to answer that question, but was brought back by Aizawa. Kid, we do not have all day. Either leave now or throw the ball. Aizawa said as Midoriya could only gulp at the statement as he looked at the ball in his right hand. Sight is all or nothing, Midoriya said as he took a deep breath before releasing it. Midoriya would begin to summon Hellfire into his right arm once more, but this time the flames and embers would dance all around his forearms as he tried to focus as much as he could summoning the Hellspawn and ensuring that it listens to him. Arise, Midoriya said as he lifted his arm and hoping that it was enough to summon the Hellspawn, and then, nothing. Hellfire would continue to wrap around his arm as the class could only stare at the green net, as if he was about to summon something, but nothing coming out. Midoriya himself was both disappointed in the Hellspawn himself, and that he honestly thought that the demon would listen to him for once. He would drop down his arm to his side. Akamo. Midoriya didn't have time to finish as the ground in front of him began to crack, which glowed yellow-orange would open, which surprised him in seeing that the Hellspawn listens for once as it began to crawl slowly out of the crack in the ground. The class and his professor behind him would all have different expressions on their faces: shock, surprise, fear, and intrigue at seeing the Hellspawn begin to crawl out of the crack in the ground, as it would stop as half of its body was showing. Flames were coming out from where the crack opened, and the Hellspawn had yellow veins glowing all around it with its eyes glowing as well. And if some of the class members were not scared shitless from seeing the creature, then some were just looking in confusion at what they were seeing, which would be echoed by one of the class members who had blonde hair with a black streak. What the fuck is that? He yelled, which caught the attention of Midoriya and the Hellspawn as it looked directly at the